across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the afternoon empire. It is the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia Harley-Brewer. She's back Monday right here on Talk. Loads to get through this afternoon. As you've been hearing throughout the course of this morning, Boris Johnson launching a blistering attack on Nigel Farage, branding the Reform leader a danger to Britain's economy and national security. This was on Harry Cole's Saves the West. Johnson accused Farage of destabilising Britain's future at a time when strong leadership is needed. Do you trust reform? Do you trust reform over the Tories? Our lines are open on that. Also, this one has to go to literally the top of the league on bizarre immigration stories. The Afghan asylum seeker who claimed to flee Taliban threats has sparked a bit of outrage after he went back to Afghanistan for a holiday. Social media posts revealed the individual visiting tourist hotspots, raising questions about the exploitation of the UK's asylum system. Raising questions. This is glaring. It's illuminated. Everyone can see it, but the government are not listening. And Labour's disability benefits reform have come under fire, with nearly 500,000 Brits facing cuts of £4,900 annually. That's all well and good if you collar people who don't need the money, but what about those disabled people who really do? More on that, and of course all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. So he's back. Yes, he's back. There should be a fanfare there and lights and all sorts of things. The comb-over king of Kensington, the political behemoth of banter and bullshine. Boris Johnson made a shock return to the political debate right here on Talk, spluttering and stuttering his way through an army of issues and talking points. You know what he's like, the odd bit of Latin, lashings of quips, and his trademark hair so dishevelled some of it was in another postcode. But as ever with Boris, once in a while, he throws in a healthy dose of seriousness. As I mentioned, Harry Cole was the one asking the questions and sat patiently waiting for the money shot. The former Prime Minister chose this station to let the world know what he thought about the party who could form the next government. Have a listen.
You know, my concerns, as I say, and they're serious concerns, are about the approach to the economy of the Reform Party and the approach on national security. And I think both of those will be severely tested in the years ahead, and people will actually want serious answers. And I think that the answers are going to be Conservative answers.
The answers are going to be Conservative answers, he said. In response, Nigel Farage said this.
Poor old Boris. Sad, isn't it, really?
Poor old Boris. Sad, isn't it? He doesn't give a hoot, our Nigel. Our Boris, however, thinks the answers are Conservatives. The answer is Conservative, not Reform UK when push comes. What he was really saying here is when push comes to shove, when you start to get serious, when you really start to look at economic issues and security, you're not going to get it from Reform UK, says Boris Johnson. The answer is Conservative. 0344 499 1000. Where do you sit on that? It's easy to forget that Boris Johnson, half an hour ago, was the Nigel Farage of the piece, of course. He was the man who was seen as the answer to all of our problems. We remember the Brexit deal. Anyone looking closely could see it wasn't a Brexit deal. It was kind of like Theresa May's deal, which is the one they all rejected and kicked her out of office. Boris Johnson gets the big gig, big majority, you may remember, and talks about sunny uplands and oven-ready deals and everything is sorted. However, he was, in the end, downed by a multitude of events. We are talking, of course, lockdowns and Colin the Caterpillar cake to go with it. Everything you never thought you would think about Boris Johnson happened. He went from hero to zero in such a short period of time, and a man with a thumping majority that everybody predicted would be the Prime Minister at least for the next 10 years, because no party could ever overthrow an 80-odd seat majority like that. Well, it turned out they could, and they did. Boris was consigned to the history bins. But Harry Cole did say something really interesting, I thought, when he was talking to Mike Graham this morning, which was that interviewing Boris Johnson felt like you were interviewing some depth and some animation and some fibre. I'm paraphrasing here. Like the big boys were back in town. Boris Johnson had that thing. He had that kind of DNA that meant, in the same way that Trump and Mr. Farage has, he was able to sell. He could impart positivity, which in this day and age is a big part of the deal, of course. Being able to be taken as a prime minister that is selling up and not down is usually a good thing, and I think we live in an era now where that's more important than ever. But of course, you don't just want headlines and smiles and high japes from a prime minister. You need detail, and his contention there was very clear. Talking to Harry Cole on Harry Cole Saves the West, he said the answers are conservative. Couldn't have been more sure about that. Is he right? Can you trust Reform UK over the Tories? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls on that. We have Peter Barnes with us, political strategist and all-round good bloke. Good to see you, Peter.
Nice to see you, Ian. How's it going?
All good at this end. Well, let's start with Boris Johnson then.
What an interview.
This was a moment,
It was a moment, yeah. Congratulations to Harry Cole on this. I thought it was a very strong interview, I have to admit. Like you said, we got more than we thought we were going to get.
Well, indeed. And, of course, you know, Boris Johnson doesn't really do many interviews. And he would have known when he came here that he's in a kind of a format, if you like, where he can have much more of a conversational chat. But that moment when he talked about when things get really serious come the next election, the answer is conservative.
Yes. Well, I'm somewhat known as the reform basher, so I do agree with Boris. I do think the Conservative brand is still relatively holding strong. I mean, yes, I think it was a more in common poll just yesterday, put them at finally. I think they got into 20 points, which is quite the win for them, considering where they were and, you know, everything they're going through, and the fact that Kemi Badenoch doesn't seem to exist at the moment. But I've long argued, actually, that this is an actual strategy that's working, and I think it's the long-term game. What the Conservatives are going to do is going to let Labour and Reform just shout it out, and then they're going to look like the clowns in the room, and then eventually the Conservatives will be that sensible voice, because it is the economy. People keep saying the next general election will be about the small boats and immigration. It's not. It's the economy, and it always is, and it always will be, because the economy is central. And the reason that they're talking about stability, the reason they're talking about defence, is to do with white lower middle class women, which is the Reform vote bloc, and it's also the ones the Tories need to win back. That particular group of people tend to vote on economic stability, and they vote mainly on national security and defence significantly. So this is, don't get me wrong, Boris knew exactly what he was talking about in this interview. This was not an accident. He knew, as with everything with Boris, it's never an accident.
It's never an accident. No, and I mean, do you think he spoke to anybody before that? Did he have a chinwag with Kemi?
I would be very surprised if there was not some kind of a casual meeting in a bar somewhere that a chance running into, which is what we call it in Westminster. They happen quite often. But I will say that there was a lot of predictions that Boris this is the comeback, this is all this kind of thing, and he was very good at kind of just quelling that down and saying no, that's not him. You know, and he wants to be a part of it. I think Boris misses the game, as we call it. But I have to admit, I don't think this is right for a Boris comeback, because it's far too soon. You've got the Boris wave narrative, and I think the country is still a little singed over Partygate. I still believe that is actually the reason the Conservatives lost the last general election, because trust evaporated after that. Once you've lost that, everything else goes out the window.
Yeah, and the trouble is with immigration now, the word about Boris is that he was very much in favour of mass immigration. He was quite relaxed about it, put it that way.
Yeah, I think it depends what you mean by mass immigration. I think he wasn't just opposed to the numbers, which is probably the more diplomatic way of putting it. But I have to admit, I think his answers on that were a little sketchy, I have to admit. He kind of focused on, we brought down legal migration. Well, you did and you didn't. There's a lot of a lot of blame games going around in that part of the interview, I have to admit. But I do think that this kind of narrative for reform is starting to backtrack for them, because in that latest poll, the reform lost 3 points, and that came during the announcement of the rescinding of the leave to remain right.
Yes.
And that seems to have gone a little bit too far. I think they've overshot the Overton window, as we call it, and I think that's a big problem for them.
A problem for them, a positive perhaps for the Conservatives.
Yes, definitely.
As you say, a slight rise in the polls.
Yes.
I mean, we haven't seen that for a long time.
And what it is it's this, I think, this kind of breaking up families narrative, and the way that a lot of the mainstream parties are now framing everything on a referendum on Nigel Farage. There's suddenly a lot of the kind of soft reform, hard Tories are coming back to the fold, as they say. And I think that's what we're starting to see, is actually people not necessarily abandoning reform, but kind of the ones who only had 1 foot in are now 2 foot out.
Could they conceivably win an election?
Oh, yes, without a shadow of a doubt.
You think the Conservatives could win an election?
I think, yeah, at the moment, it's anybody's game. I still think the Labour Party...
Peter Barnes is saying, right here, what's the date today? It's the 25th of September, 2025. Peter Barnes, political strategist, you've been around the Westminster bloc for a long time. You know the terrain. The Conservatives can win the next election.
Yes, they can. But it's all about whether... But they've got, I think, about a 4-month window now. And that's it. She's got conference. Kemi's conference is the defining feature, if she's even going to make it to be leader, let alone them win the general election. Without a strong conference, where we announce strategic pulling out of the ECHR and a lot of kind of real business reforms, which is going to be economy heavy at the conference, I think the Conservatives are probably not done for, but I think it's 2001, 2005. But the idea that they're completely out of the game, I've never believed that, because, you know, our politics is not following the old rules. So why suddenly on this particular issue do we follow the old rules?
Kemi's conference.
Yes.
There's a ring to that.
Yeah.
Kemi's conference, KC.
Yeah, and
if she messes it up, it'd be KFC.
Yeah,
but that's
exactly.
story.
It's also KC because it's about the ECHR decision, which is being run by the KC, by a powerful KC, taking the ideology out of the ECHR decision, which is very important for Kemi's platform.
Let's have a look at this story, because this all feeds into the current mood of where the nation is and what people feel strongly about. I think this is beyond staggering, this one. It's a jaw-dropper. The Afghan asylum seeker who was granted UK refuge because of the Taliban. Afghanistan was an unsafe place. There were terrible things going to happen to him and his family. Couldn't possibly remain in Afghanistan. Had to run as quick as he could. Hail of bullets, I'm sure, as he left the country, quivering like a wreck, and made his way to the safety of the UK. Decided to go back to Afghanistan for a holiday. Like you do, right? Critics say this exposes exploitation of Britain's system, with the Home Office now reviewing their immigration status.
He's not currently an asylum seeker. He was given protected status.
Right.
That does allow him to access a refugee travel card, which he can use to go in and out of the country, obviously for legitimate purposes. There is only a couple of very strict rules with that travel card, and this is why he's under investigation. The 2 basic rules are: you cannot go to the country you're from, and you cannot go to a country you've claimed asylum from, which I think everyone across the board can agree is how the asylum system should work.
So
if you're claiming a country is too dangerous, surely you cannot...
Surely you can't go back. That's Sun journalist Thomas Godfrey who broke that story. I mean, it is, Peter, we were just saying it while that clip was playing. We've seen the chicken nugget story. We've seen plenty that are in that kind of... This is in a whole new stratosphere.
This is a whole different game. Honestly, I genuinely thought this was some kind of like joke story and some kind of satire magazine. I genuinely did, because I was like, we can't allow this. How on earth is our immigration system that much of a farce that this is where we are? I mean, don't get me wrong, we sit here and we're outraged pretty much on a daily basis, but this one, I mean, it does smack of like it can't be real. Like, I need to double check everything in this story, because the idea that one, you go to Afghanistan for a holiday, that I find laughable. But again, what I think this really bleeds into is the fact the public are seeing all these stories and they're not seeing justice. They're not seeing fairness. And fairness is such an important feature of British culture. I mean, it's in our language. We have so many idioms for it. But without that, I think it just shows that we're nowhere on this issue, and the government does not have a grip at all. How nobody has been fired from the Home Office this entire time over the migration crisis and the handling of it, I do not understand. There is no accountability, there are no standards, and this is how this stuff happens. We can blame the courts and all the rest of it, but a lot of this stuff comes from decisions made by politicians and the civil service and all the rest of them that are putting these structures in place that are keeping people like this here. Now, it's looking like he's broke Article 1C of the Refugee Convention, so basically he has to give up his claims and all the rest of it. But again, that takes an investigation, that takes time, that takes money and resources. So either way, the British taxpayer loses out on this story, and it has to stop. And what we really need is a proper rollback of the framework that is keeping people here. And that does include pulling out of the Refugee Convention, pulling out of the ECHR, and keeping the bits that we want, obviously. But, I mean, it's just laughable now. We are an international laughingstock at this. Other world leaders are pulling their hair out at the UK because we aren't tackling this issue. We're not only keeping people here, we're rolling out the red carpet.
Yeah.
You know, the number of people that are about to become on the benefit system because of their extended stay on asylum is astronomical. It's costing us a fortune, and the economic catastrophe coming around the corner is going to make 2008 look like child's play.
It's extraordinary, by the way, that when I would have thought that when this fellow went to Heathrow to jump on a plane, didn't something flag on the system?
Wasn't there? Why isn't there a big red flag shing?
Because I reckon if you or I wanted to go to Afghanistan for a holiday,
you go first.
Sounds a little bit odd, doesn't it? Yeah, got a window cleaning round in the city centre, you know. I would have thought that in itself would just flag up a question. It's like, why are you going to Afghanistan?
Why is there a flight to Afghanistan?
But if you're somebody, surely your status on the computer came up as this man has claimed asylum here while escaping from Afghanistan.
So there's also an extra element of this about whether he's done fraud, because if he's travelled on his Afghan documents, which he's not allowed to do, that is actually classed as fraud, because they get given this certain travel document that does allow them to come and go. They aren't prisoners here. We have to keep remembering that. And this seems to be the thing. If he's travelled on his Afghan passport, then yes, he has broken the law and he will be rescinded and all the rest of it. But if he's travelled on his UK kind of travel visa, then what are the rules here, and why are the rules allowing this situation? That's the question we should be asking here. We could be outraged, but we have to keep remembering to ask the questions to fix it. My problem is we're seeing all these stories, getting very mad about them, rightly so, and not doing anything to fix anything.
100%. 0344 499 1000. Your comments on that. And can you trust Reform UK? Only asking that question on the basis of Boris Johnson saying you can't trust Reform. The answer is Conservative, he says. What do you make of those comments? Peter Barnes with us, and we'll look at more stories in a couple of moments' time. This is Talk.
He's not currently an asylum seeker. He was given protected status.
Right.
That does allow him to access a refugee travel card, which he can use to go in and out of the country, obviously for legitimate purposes. There is only a couple of very strict rules with that travel card, and this is why he's under investigation. The two basic rules are: you cannot go to the country you're from, and you cannot go to a country you've claimed asylum from, which I think everyone across the board can agree is how the asylum system should work.
So
if you're claiming a country is too dangerous, surely you cannot go back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
23 minutes after 1 o'clock. Yeah, it is Talk. It is the home of common sense. It is your call, of course, on all the things we touch on here, including our next story here, Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff ignoring warnings to declare. I mean, it wasn't much money, to be fair. It wasn't a lot of money. It was only £740,000 in political donations. Failing to declare it, breaking electoral law, Labour Together, this is his think tank, Morgan McSweeney, of course, fined for over 20 breaches after failing to report the funds. Let's have a listen to the Work and Pensions Secretary on this issue, Pat McFadden.
Do you think he'll stay in his post?
Yes, I do. And, you know, I think he's a very talented individual, as I say, someone I've worked with closely. And these issues which are being raised today, I can see why the Tories want to make as much of this as they can, and they want you to be asking me and other Labour spokespeople about it. But the Electoral Commission, which is the body which is charged with policing donations, declarations, everything of this kind, they looked into these issues 3 or 4 years ago. They took action at the time, and they issued a statement last night making clear that was the case.
So they've issued a statement. They were fined 14,250 quid, Peter. I mean, clearly there was a breach of this. I think the problem with this, I'm not sure it quite penetrates to the wider country. It's not like an Angela Rayner thing or a Peter Mandelson thing.
I actually think this is actually more about credibility, because the one thing that they've kind of done is they've kind of gone, like, retroactively declared it, and they've added layers of context and another excuse and another excuse and another. That's what looks bad. What I will say is that party donations is the third rail of British politics. You touch it and you die. Everybody knows that. Everybody is awful at party donations because the people with a lot of money tend to have a lot of baggage with them, and a lot of people don't like that. And yeah, I have to admit, the thing with this is Morgan McSweeney should have known all of this. He is supposed to be the chief of staff. When he was running the think tank, he was a very well-informed, savvy guy. He should have known how to do all of this and what to do up front. This is yet again another kind of notch on the post of his errors, and they are starting to rack up. And it's where you look at Peter Mandelson, we look at the winter fuel allowance, you know, and now we've got this. There is starting to be a pattern, and the worst thing in British politics you can ever have is a pattern, because that just means that, you know, it's not just a one-off. There's a kind of pattern of behaviour and incompetence. And, you know, I've always said that he's a great campaigner, not very good at the governing. He's a Dominic Cummings style. You can get the narrative out there, you can marshal people around on campaign days and all the rest of it, but actually governing. So you always say you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. He's forgotten how to do his prose.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I do wonder, you know, I think he's probably safe.
I actually think it would be the thing that sinks him, not anything else, because it's technical. And they can say, well, you know, he didn't follow the rules, and, you know, there's a way to kind of shuffle him out through this than there is on anything that is kind of politically toxic, such as the Mandelson thing, because that's got Starmer's fingerprints all over it. There's no way that Starmer would have known anything about this, so you can distance the Prime Minister from it. If I was there, I would say get rid of him over this than anything else.
Well, in theory, you should get rid of him, but I wonder whether Keir Starmer is, wedded to this guy in the same way that Alistair Campbell wedded to Tony Blair.
There is a big theory that we're actually living in McSweeneyism and not Starmerism. In other words, Starmer is just the vessel, and actually the ideas and the kind of machine behind it all is actually Morgan McSweeney and his kind of Blairite gang, because he was one of the people that obviously put Peter Mandelson in place, and he brought back Jonathan Powell. There's a lot of the Blairite influence has never left the Labour Party, and it's very, very clear that he's Morgan is Blair's guy. But I have to admit, this doesn't look good. But yet again, it is a compounding of chaos at number 10. I mean, the Boris Johnson years were chaos. This, my lord, it makes a Carry On film look like, Schindler's List. It's absolutely ridiculous how crazy all of this stuff is, because we have to remember, all of it self-induced. There's nothing that's really happened to this government that they haven't caused themselves, and that's what we have to keep remembering. All this chaos, all the mess is because of lack of leadership, because Keir Starmer doesn't know what he's doing, and the backbenchers are in control. The factions are all at each other's throats, and Andy Burnham is openly challenging him.
Absolutely. There is, of course, it's perception, isn't it? Sometimes when perception becomes reality.
Yes, more so at Downing Street than anything else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Starmer sits there and going, God, for the first time in my life, I've got a sympathy with Boris. I've got a sympathy with May or Truss.
Yeah,
or
definitely. If you look at US presidents,
it's out of control.
Yes,
things happen. It's interesting. Somebody mentioned online. Somebody sent a message in about Boris and the parties. Joel says he locked the country down and then parted with his cronies in public office. He should be in prison. Now, it's interesting because I was talking to somebody who was working there at that time and said, Boris Johnson never attended a party ever. You wouldn't even get him to attend a party when there wasn't a lockdown.
That's true.
He worked long hours. He'd pop in and say hello to somebody if it was a losing
He was also
do.
still recovering from a very bad case of COVID.
He was still recovering. The thing he got fined for, which is the most curious thing in the world, was actually his own surprise birthday party.
Yeah, which seemed a little cruel.
It's a bit bizarre, isn't it? Well, I didn't know it was happening. Are you sure? Well, it was a surprise.
Yeah, definitely. But I will say that the Partygate is the central bit that brought down the Conservative Party. I said when Boris Johnson became leader that he would be the architect of his own downfall.
Yep.
And
just happened quicker than we thought.
Well, it happened a lot longer than I thought, because I actually...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never really been a big Boris Johnson fan. I've always been he's a bumbling buffoon that will put his foot in it because that's what he does. Yeah. And unfortunately, he did. But I have to admit, I do think the way he was kind of thrown out the window, that wasn't the best way of doing it, and the successive elections and all the Tory downfall there is of the party's own making. But I have to admit, Partygate absolutely wrecked trust, it wrecked competency, and it's that idea, obviously, that we were all locked down, they were all partying. Yeah. That image stuck with the public, and it sticks with them now.
Yeah, and Joel made it clear there. What Joel said is what represents it represents the view of many people.
And the idea that Boris can come back...
Whatever the details. He can't come back.
And this idea that some Conservatives had, that he is the kind of prodigal son, let it go. It's like with Liz Truss, let her go. Let her off into the wild and off she goes. We tried, but it's gone. Let it go.
Final story, Peter. This did make me laugh. It's probably a bit unfair, but it did make me laugh, and that is that the West Wing of the White House, where they've been doing quite a lot of significant. I think they've got a new ballroom being built in there. They've done something in the garden. They've got everything, and they've also redone the Presidential Walk of Fame, where they put all the previous presidents in a nice long line. You can see it there if you're watching. There's Obama, there's Trump, and then there's no Biden. No, there's just a picture featuring a photo of an auto pen, which is how they get presidents to sign their signature. Yeah. It's an auto pen that does it, because there's so many documents they have to officially sign. And there were jokes made, of course, about Biden and the reliance on the auto pen. So they put literally...
I know, it's brilliant.
It's not like some meme that they put out there.
No, they've literally done it.
They've literally done it. So
I will say...
If you're like the president of, China going on a walk through the Presidential Walk of Fame, you come across that picture and you just see a pen.
True, but I will say there's a lot of context behind a lot of this stuff, because if you think about it, Trump's 2.0 is a lot of theatre. Yeah. Because what he's doing, in my opinion, is legacy building. Because most people might remember the politics or the speeches. He wants people to remember moments. So let's remember that he made the Democrats watch him undo all of their policies in his inauguration. Yeah. Let's look at the tariffs, where there was a big fanfare over that. You've got this. People are remembering Trump pulling apart the Democrats in the way they tried to pull him apart. Yeah. This is spite, but it's not done by kind of the courts, which is what they do. This is the way that Trump is doing it. There is a reason behind it. It's not just to have a little bit of fun. This is you try to bring me down, watch what I can do, and I don't need an auto pen to do it.
I saw somebody this morning said, "Oh, it's just for the photographers. They'll change that tomorrow."
No,
they won't.
They won't. But I will say the things
there.
that are in image and are in shot for the White House are very important. Let's not remember when Obama removed the Churchill bust.
Yeah, true.
Like it was a very significant moment of a kind of the break of the special relationship. What's in the White House is very, very important. In the same way that people removing the Margaret Thatcher portrait here, that was a symbolic moment, and we can't really kind of downplay them. But Trump's legacy building, that's what he's doing.
Listen, Peter, we've hit the clock. In fact, we've even overrun. What about that? Always good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Peter Barnes with us on the programme. Over to you, 0344 499 1000 on anything you've heard there. We're talking about trusting reform over the Conservatives after those comments from Boris Johnson, who's essentially saying, look, when push comes to shove, you can have your fun with Nigel Farage, but actually, if you want to get serious, Conservatives are the answer. That's what he said. Gwaine Towler, who's, of course, very senior political strategist and reform member, will join us, and James Starkey, former Home Office advisor, on this very issue. Can you trust Reform UK? Would you trust them over the Tories? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. 25 to 2. So much to talk about on this. It's kind of fascinating that, Boris Johnson's thrown a spanner in the works, but he's certainly lobbed something into the pot of debate. So lots to talk about on that. He essentially says that you can't really trust reform when it comes to the heavy lifting, when it comes to the detail. And he's been quite clear on that. He was speaking, of course, with Harry Cole on the Harry Saves the West programme. Tearing in, really, essentially, to Nigel Farage and the party, calling them a threat to Britain's economy and national security. And, of course, this comes after Farage blamed Johnson for a post-Brexit Boris wave of illegal or legal migration that swamped Britain. With reform surging in the polls, the battle for the right wing is heating up. Let's have a listen, a reminder. This is exactly what Boris Johnson said to Harry.
My concerns, as I say, and they're serious concerns, are about the approach to the economy of the Reform Party and the approach on national security. And I think Both of those will be severely tested in the years ahead, and people will actually want serious answers. And I think that the answers are going to be conservative.
The answer is going to be conservative. I think that should. We'll speak to James Starkey in a moment, former Home Office advisor. Gwaine Towler, how you doing, Gwaine?
Hi there, not too bad at all.
Always good to have you on with us. Is this well, let's just remind ourselves, by the way, what Mr Farage said in response to those comments from Boris Johnson. Here it is.
Poor old Boris. Sad, isn't it, really?
Poor old Boris, sad, isn't it? I mean, that will be, I guess, Nigel's response. I mean, I don't think he's making that up. He doesn't look particularly bothered.
I love the idea that Boris Johnson attacked somebody else for not being good at details. That is astonishing. He attacks us for on the economy, and look what happened to the economy under the Conservatives, and the tax rises and the hammering of small business, and it is extraordinary when you've got Farage and Richard Tice going to talk to the Bank of England about serious stuff. We've got Boris. He just said, "I don't trust him on the economy," and has nothing to add to that. It is a very, very weird approach to it. And under Boris, of course, you had sadly the Chancellor, Jay Rishi, spaffing huge sums of money up the wall on Eat Out to Help Out and things of this sort. It was a disastrous time. So I'm sorry, we're not going to take too many lessons on detail from Boris. I don't do detail Johnson.
I mean, what he's essentially saying, isn't it, that when you can have your fun with Reform UK, and there's a lot of bluster and there's a lot of mood music, and they're doing stuff in the bowl. But when push comes to shove, these new kids on the block won't have a clue. Only the Conservatives know how to do it. That message is the one he's trying to impart. It's a big ask, isn't it?
Clearly, that's the message he's tried to offer and to present. But his own track record suggests precisely the opposite. You've got people like Mr Tice, in people like Farage, who actually do know how the city works. I don't think Boris Johnson knows anything how to work anything apart from an expense account. It's just... he has... The fact that somebody like Danny Crew, the fact that Nadine Dorries came over, the great Boris believers, in the case of Nadine, have come over to reform, shows that his style of bluster politics is over. And sadly, in many ways, so is the Conservative Party. When he says the future is Conservative, however, he may not be wrong about that, but it's small c, not big C.
Do you think there is... there was a poll out recently. Peter Barnes, our previous guest, was saying it was for the first time it showed the Tories almost in double digits, and they haven't been there for what seems like a decade. Are they back? I mean, are they reinventing themselves? Are they refinding themselves? Gwaine, is there something going on here at Tory HQ?
In Thetford last night, Reform came in the by-election to 44% from a standing start. The Tories dropped by, I think, 17%. Are they back? Does a dead cat bounce? Maybe that does bounce, but I can't see that happening with the Tories. They have so little to offer, and I do not think the people of this country are going to forgive them for the failures of the last 14 years. They've got a long way to go before that happens. And you listen to people like Danny Kruger last Monday when he joined us, talking about how the small c conservatism that I think this country does hold very dear to its heart, that torch has passed from the failed legacy Conservative Party to Reform. Now, we've got a long way to go. We do have a lot of work to do, but we are aware of that. We're knuckling down and getting on with that work. When it comes to the general election, we will have a very fine retail offer to the public of policies that have been considered, worked through, and people who actually know how business works, how things like that and the city works, delivering policies that make this country and restore this country back to what it should be.
Being objective and just stepping away from your kind of reform colours, though, I mean, just as a political junkie, which we all are, of course, let's look at it from that perspective. It is extraordinary, isn't it, the Boris Johnson journey? Half an hour ago, Boris Johnson was kind of the Nigel Farage figure of the moment. He was the oven-ready man, he was the sunny uplands king, he was the man that was going to make the world better, he cracked the red wall, he did all of it, came back with a thumping majority.
I recall that breasts would be larger under Conservative governments. I mean, talk about bluster.
That's not going to go down in the great prime ministerial quotes of our time, is it, really?
It's so odd. However, look, Boris was fun. There's no doubt about it. But when push came to shove, when things got tough, he collapsed. When Farage stood the Brexit party down to ensure that Boris could get Brexit done, and then at the first hurdle, when he had the opportunity to go back to Brussels and sort things out, to renegotiate with a big majority of its back, he did nothing. He did nothing and left Northern Ireland drowning in the North Sea and in the Irish Sea. He left part of our country behind. That, to my mind, is one of the greatest failures. Now, we talk about the Boris wave, another great failure, but the constitutional failure and the lack of understanding of the importance of sovereignty, I think, yes, you're right. Boris was a fun character, and in many ways, Farage is a fun character. But I think the difference is people have prospered on believing and trusting what Farage said because he sticks to his word, he sticks with it. Whereas I don't believe there's anybody in these islands who has done well out of believing a word that Boris Johnson has ever uttered. Neither his editors, nor his proprietors, nor the general public, nor women.
And on that profound and powerful moment, Gwaine, where we stop there. Thank you, Gwaine Towler, political strategist, always hate that word, Reform member, and of course very, very close to Reform UK still. Let's get a word from James Starkey, former Home Office advisor at the time when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. I mean, that was fairly damning stuff, James. Do you recognise the former boss at the time when you were advising the Home Office? Is that the man you remember?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Gwaine, and I think he does touch on a point, which is that it's no doubt the electorate were disappointed with the Conservatives after the last election. You only need to look at the result. But I think, Boris's attack on Farage also do land on something. You talked with Gwaine there about the comparisons between the two. I mean, one of the interesting things in terms of where we are right now is if you look at polling, there was some polling by YouGov in the last month or two, and it showed something to me that's very interesting, which touches on what we're talking about, which is only kind of 24% of people think that Farage would do a good job of running the country, but 32% or thereabouts think he would do a better job than anyone else. So you've got almost like 10% of people who are saying, I don't think he's very good, but I think he's better than what we've got and what we've had. And that is kind of where we are, and is why Farage is able to kind of launch policies like the stuff on indefinite leave to remain last week, which was full of holes, and they had to reverse a lot of it within 48 hours, but doesn't seem to do them a great amount of damage.
Do you think that we're just in completely new terrain now, that people aren't necessarily comparing? I mean, some will obviously be going, well, Nigel Farage, he's not any of the above, so, and he can't be any worse than what's out there, let's give it a go, which has usually been the way. I think that's how Keir Starmer found himself really in number 10. But I wonder whether there's just been a sort of huge shift in the way we judge or our appetites for what we want from a political party, where it's no longer the comparison game, and Farage and Reform are feeling like a party that will just do things differently. They won't be the same pre-prepared press release parties of the past. That wasn't meant to be alliteration, by the way, but it came out rather well. But you take my point. They are just a completely new outfit, and they're going to do things very differently.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. Basically, the first thing you need to understand, I believe, when you try and look at what's going on, why people moving to Reform, supporting Farage, is that people are fundamentally very, very angry. And that's a large amount of time. So Gwaine is right when he criticises the last Conservative government. There were things that we failed on. And before that, the Labour government, this goes all the way back really to the financial crash in 2008. People were promised various things, whether it be on migration by the Conservatives, we've had a stagnant economy for over a decade, and so they're kind of fed up. So I think with Farage, what you see is people saying, we're not really sure he'd be a very good Prime Minister, we're not really sure he'd be over the detail. And I think Boris is absolutely right when he criticises their economic plans. I mean, this morning, Farage didn't seem to rule out political control of the Bank of England. which they were talking about I'm not sure how the markets would react to that, and I'd be interested to know if that. I'm surprised we haven't seen an attack from the Conservative Party on that, to be honest. But those are the kinds of things that, as we get close to an election, might have an impact, because there's no doubt they've got pretty strong support amongst kind of 20 to 25% of the population, of the voting population. They need to be pushing towards 35% to get a majority. And I think that's where it will get dicey, when people will have questions about reform's kind of competence or detail.
When you were working with the Home Office, when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, and, to begin with, of course, 2017, for a couple of years, it was, riding on the crest of a wave, and along comes Boris. He's penetrating all these red wall areas, doing rather well, thumping majority. Everyone assumed he'd be there for 2 terms. Can't overturn an 80 majority. How many of us said that? Forever, almost. But was there a sense when he was in charge? Do you ever remember being at a meeting when a Downing Street diktat came down the line and hearing somebody go, this man's nuts? Because he was unconventional. And I don't mean to be rude to Boris Johnson, but was there a sense that he was in control as Prime Minister despite the bluster, or was it as chaotic as it sometimes seems now?
No, I certainly never heard that. I mean, I've spent a bit of time with Boris, so I wouldn't claim to be super close to him. I think he's an incredibly intelligent man. He's proven himself a serial election winner. I think in terms of, under his government, I do, I watched the interview, or Harry Cole's interview with him. I do think on immigration, look, I think that it was a new system. The interesting question I haven't seen answered from Reform is, would they have a new immigration points-based system? Because Farage was always pro a points-based system. This is what the system we have is now. I think you can use that to bring down migration quite easily. You just kind of change the points and the salary thresholds and so on. I think that in those years after Brexit, we didn't get on top of the numbers, but Boris is also right to point out that who are those people do you want to throw out? Do you want to throw out the Hong Kong BNO passport holders? Do you want to throw out the Ukrainians, the nurses, there was a pent-up demand of kind of healthcare after COVID, and so I think it's a correct criticism that we didn't get on top of the numbers as much as we could, and so to defend them all would be wrong. But I think it's not as black and white as saying it was complete incompetence. That's not true. Yeah. The system that Boris oversaw to be set up under Priti Patel is a system that's still in use now, and actually I think probably Nigel Farage will use himself to bring down numbers. Just a very final point. We'll have to be brief, James. Can the Conservatives win the next election? No. If that's the brief answer. No, indeed. That's just unrealistic. Well, I would agree with you. We have Peter Barnes, the strategist, with us in the first section of the show, and he thinks they still can. No, I don't think it's possible they can win the next election. I think the fight for the Conservatives is to come out of the next election still being a relevant party. To get from where they are to a majority, I think I just don't believe it's possible, particularly with the right split. OK, James, on that point, thank you. Great to have you on with us, James Starkey, former Home Office advisor when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. You heard Gwaine Towler from Reform UK before that. 0344 499 1000. Boris Johnson's contention is you can't trust Reform. When it all boils down, when all the flurry and all the great quips about swans and goodness knows what else is done, you can't trust them. Only the Conservatives are the answer, says Boris Johnson. Said it right here on Talk, speaking to Harry Cole just yesterday. Your thoughts on that? Lines are open. This is Talk.
while Reform are in the ascendancy and they're ahead in the polls, Boris still has an appeal to the exact target voters that Reform are going for. Those people that perhaps voted Labour for a long time, then they voted for Brexit, then they voted for Boris in 2019. They're disappointed with the government, they're disappointed with the Tories, but Boris is the one that could, upset the Reform apple cart. So almost like sort of Van Helsing, they're sort of trying to drive a stake into Boris is down and out, but they just want to really make sure he's not coming back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is from Malcolm. It says, Nigel might be a city man, but he's definitely not a constituency man. I've tried to contact him on a number of local issues, but have never received a reply from him or his office, says Malcolm in Clacton. That's always disappointing to hear when you don't hear back from your MP. One from Dave in Walthamstow, who says the return of Boris, no credibility, no thanks, no chance. I think that probably sums it up. I don't think Boris himself would come, unless he's thinking, right, if the Tories can get to a position where they're not annihilated, which is the point that James Starkey, former Home Office advisor, just said to us, so they don't win, but they're not annihilated, they're still relevant, then he could come back and then become what he would call the real deal. And then everyone's forgotten about Colin the Caterpillar cake and parties and lockdowns and goodness knows what else. Let's go to Trevor in Harrow. How you doing, Trevor? Oh no, sorry, this is a voice note from Trevor in Harrow.
Most ex-Tory members, including myself, are never, ever going back, no matter who they put up as leader. I still feel totally betrayed. Labour and the Conservatives are two cheeks of the same bottom. I will vote Reform. It doesn't matter that I'm not completely happy with them, but I will back Reform all the way to get rid of this whole political establishment.
Two cheeks of the same bottom. I love the way that Trevor said bottom, just to be nice and polite when talking on the airwaves. Richard is down in London. What's going on, Richard? Good afternoon.
Yes, I mean, interesting all this. I think that voice note explained why I feel so fearful for the future of British politics. There's so many people who just got a closed mind about this. I mean, the idea that the Conservatives have let people down for decades is complete nonsense. I mean, Margaret Thatcher saved our economy back in the 80s, and in many respects, the 14 years in power were about putting the deficit right. We had the pandemic. I mean, people forget that they were scared. They were scared spotless about this, and actually the government paid people to stay at home, did exactly what people wanted, and then people turned on them. I just think we keep on blaming people. But in terms of Farage and Boris, what really worries me is I actually blame Farage for the Brexit problems, because he didn't tell us that we wouldn't have control of our borders until we repealed Blair's Human Rights Act and left the European Court of Human Rights, which, and I might add, Ian, neither did high-profile supporters of Brexit like Andrew Neil or Julia Hartley-Brewer. So I think we've all got to hold our hands up and say that with Brexit, we actually, to some extent, we didn't know what we were doing. But to make it worse, Farage actually said the Germans would beg us for a trade deal. He actually said it's going to be very easy, we'll get a trade deal, no problem.
Do you remember when David Davis was doing the tours?
I mean, I think he actually said the Germans need to sell us our cars, so they'll beg us for a trade deal. Now, Ian, those were the 3 or 4 worst years I can remember of British politics. The European Union turned on us and actually said, we're going to make this so difficult for you that in terms of the Irish border, we will threaten you with IRA terrorism. The IRA will come back if you insist on a hard border. Now, these are these are countries that, frankly, we saved from fascism 80 years ago. So I feel disgusted with the European Union. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, we've got to get away from blaming politicians for everything, because all that happens is you get a simpleton, like really a very spiteful simpleton like Keir Starmer in power. Farage is another simpleton. I mean, his comments backing up his friend Trump about paracetamol. Yeah. He seemed to be saying that you can compare paracetamol to thalidomide. I mean, for God's sakes, Ian, that's off the scale of stupidity. And
yeah, David Bull, our own David Bull, managed to clarify that on the same radio station and said, no, there is no link, and he was quite unequivocal. But I take your point. There is, I think Nigel Farage is now kind of stuck between, do I never condemn Donald Trump because he's a sort of bit of a mate? That's kind of a mate, or do and sort of play to that part of the gallery. So I think he's not quite worked out what he should say in response to the Trump stuff, like the eating swans compared to the eating the cats and dogs thing. It's kind of all of that. But is he going to be the next Prime Minister? Can you trust him more than Boris, Richard?
Well, if I go on to the next thing, the Southport murders were, I think, in many respects, the most horrifying that we've seen since the Hindley and Brady murders, because there was a sense of real savagery there, and that if that man wasn't stopped. Now, in the days after that, Farage said something like, "Do we know it might be one of those men coming over the borders?" Now, Ian, that's I'm a free speech absolutist, but you have to be careful what you. After the worst murders for 30 years, I would have said something more guarded. So
you would have kind of waited on that. Listen, I have to step in, Richard, only because the news is literally going to happen in 15 seconds. But thank you. It's an interesting point to finish that on as well, in terms of capabilities and who you trust. Can you trust reform over the Tories? This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back to the home of common sense. So we are talking Boris Johnson launching a blistering attack on Nigel Farage's Reform Party, branding the Reform leader a danger to Britain's economy and national security. This was Mr Johnson speaking on Harry Cole Saves the West right here on Talk. He accused Farage of destabilising Britain's future at a time when strong leadership is needed. But is that strong leadership coming from the Conservatives? I know a lot can happen in 4 years, but can they really turn that oil tanker around? Can you trust Reform UK over the Tories? All of these questions, so much to talk about on that one. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be speaking as well about the Afghan asylum seeker who claimed to flee Taliban threats. Had to get out of there, had to get out of Afghanistan. They were firing bullets. They were going to hang him by the ankles and God knows what. So unsafe, he made it through 3 safe countries before reaching the UK for some solace and security. Unfortunately, he went on holiday. Back to Afghanistan. You can't make it up. Social media posts revealed the individual visited tourist hotspots, which raises a shed load of questions about the exploitation of our asylum system. More on that shortly. And Labour's disability benefit reforms have come under fire, with nearly 500,000 Brits facing cuts of up to almost £5,000 every year. We'll have more on that shortly. 0344 499 1000. This from Helen. How do illegal immigrants have enough money to fly abroad, working in the black market? The whole system is not fit for purpose. Sack the whole Home Office. Well, you would think as well. I thought that as well, Helen, when I first saw this story. I thought, well, what kind of job would you have? I don't know what a flight to Afghanistan is, and a return flight as well. But this character had been all over the place, by all accounts, to other places and areas. How was he financing that? Peter in Lancashire, we've tried the blue crew, we've tried the red crew, and they're as bad. So it's time for the turquoise crew. If they're as bad, it's time for revolution. It's a very good point. That may well end up being the answer. We're in funny times politically, aren't we? But I think when it comes to those stories, there's not a day goes past when we don't talk about one of these kind of bizarre sort of human rights defences that are used to remain in the UK. Remember chicken nuggets, the man who had the wrong hair colour, someone who was had an agoraphobic kid or whatever, right to family. I mean, the list goes on. I think this one is sort of bullseye territory in the league of things that are unfathomable. The Afghan asylum seeker granted refuge in the UK, then returned to Afghanistan a couple of years later for a holiday. The place he escaped because of its tyranny and impending death. Went back on holiday, which exposes a blatant exploitation of the system, of course. Labour's one-in, one-out scheme, by the way, swaps migrants as 32,000 arrive by small boats. Foreign criminals are being handed £2,000 to leave the country. Taxpayers are being taken for a ride, it seems, under Labour government once again. This is beyond belief. Let's speak with David Wood, former Director General of the Immigration Enforcement, the operational arm of the Home Office. Good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon, Julian.
I mean, this is one of those that you think, if somebody told you this in a pub, you'd go, mate, that's one of those things you read on Twitter. Someone made it up. It didn't happen. But apparently it really did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very embarrassing to the Home Office, isn't it? It just emphasises how the system is exploited and can be exploited. I mean, they're now investigating him and presumably, hopefully, if he has been granted asylum, take that away from him. But it does show in particular how the Home Office and ministers could be blindsided. I mean, the hotel story the last few days where taxis are paid for by the government. It appeared ministers had no clue whatsoever that's going on, so they don't know what's going on in the hotels and don't know what's going on these things. And yes, clearly where he got the money, who knows? I mean, once you're granted asylum, you can work, of course, but it's still quite substantial funds needed to do that trip and keep himself there, I presume. I
mean, you know what this area is like in the Home Office, and I've told this story so many times now that I remember talking to Jack Straw when he was Home Secretary, and you only had to, because obviously if you're the Home Secretary, you've got so many tentacles to that job, from the police, and at the time even the Justice Department was included in the Home Office, if you remember. It was a huge thing. But the minute you mention immigration, the immigration part of his job, the minute I raised that, his eyes kind of went grey. He was about to discombobulate. It's like, almost like, don't talk about it. There's so much to it. It's so complex. There's a warehouse over there that has got so many files in it. No one's ever going to get through it. It's always been this monolithic problem that has haunted governments, and there's so many elements to it. And this is kind of one of them, I suppose. The idea. And by the way, wouldn't someone's, you may or may not know the answer to this, David, if you were, when you turn up at Heathrow, wouldn't something flag on the system that your status via your passport, whatever it is you've got, would perhaps show that you are someone who's been granted asylum, having escaped, if you like, from Afghanistan?
Well, it should do, because the system's all linked, of course, not just at Heathrow, but the advanced passenger information. It goes through border force, have a intelligence system. I mean, that's how why people are stopped at the border, not necessarily because they're asylum seekers, because of other things that they detect, of course, from the system. So there are systems in place what do allow for that sort of thing to happen. But he won't be the first, he won't be the last. I mean, who claims asylum then finds himself travelling back there. But that has happened before, and I'm sure it'll happen again.
Yeah, I'm sure if I wanted to go to Afghanistan, I have no desire to, by the way, for no other, I'm sure there's beautiful parts of Afghanistan still, but I reckon there would be some additional paperwork to that trip. Reasons for going, if nothing else.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether a visa is required or not for Afghanistan, quite frankly. But of course, that wouldn't be the British government. You'll be applying to the Afghan government for a visa if there was one. So that wouldn't necessarily alert the Home Office anyway. But as you say, he's clearly not someone who deserves or needs asylum in this country if he can go back there on holiday.
And travelled through many safe countries to get to here in the first place, and then decided, I'll just nip back and see me old mates, down the road.
Well, that's one of the dilemmas, isn't it? As you say, they come through a succession of safe countries before they come here, and in this particular case, he flies back to the alleged place that threatens him for holiday.
There's I was about to say, David, there's another couple of stories around under this umbrella of immigration. The first family arrived in the UK yesterday, and the one in, one out thing. I mean, it's a little bit of a joke that we're calling it one in, one out. I think it's currently 32,000 in and 32,000 into this country illegally, as it would be described, and one or two out at the moment. So it's not working that way. But in the exchange thing, the first of three arrived under the policy. We don't know much about these people, but they came from France. I'm sure the Labour government will claim it's a victory for Keir Starmer's new immigration policy.
Well, I mean, it's not going to make a difference to scratch the surface, is it, even if they build this up? The one positive thing about it is an agreement with France to take any back, because clearly the answer to this problem is as they arrive at Dover, they're sent straight back in large numbers to France because they've come from that safe country. And if French would accept that, I'm sure there's lots of efforts made to try and get the French to accept that, it would stop the problem more or less immediately, because no one's going to pay facilitators a couple of £1,000 when all that happens as soon as you get halfway across the channel, you're taken straight back to Calais. So that is the answer. So the positive is that there's some movement in French there, but the scheme they have at the moment is not going to scratch the surface. It's not going to put all people in fear coming across the channel that they can be taken back, because it's 1 in 1,000 is likely to be taken back, I guess.
The odds are, I mean, it's still worth taking that trip, isn't it? Because there is a much greater chance that you're not going to end up being sent back to France.
You've probably got a similar chance of dying in the channel. That they're still come across the channel.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And another one that I spotted as well, which is sort of extraordinary. I guess the Home Office would argue that this might sound unpopular or unpalatable, but it's a cheaper option, and this is deporting foreign criminals who've done some of the most horrendous things. Now, it's not just a case of going to meet somebody at Wormwood Scrubs, stick him in a pair of handcuffs and going straight over to Gatwick or Heathrow. There is a price to be paid, and that price is paid to the person. 2,000 quid it could be. You get 1,500 for leaving during prison sentence, 750 quid post-sentence, and 500 quid for vulnerable individuals. And there was some imagery that was taken online of people literally on the plane being handed credit cards or prepaid cards loaded with the 2,000 quid. I mean, it's a terrible look, isn't it?
It's a terrible look. I mean, all I would say is if they, and it's maybe a big if, if they come from countries which we cannot currently remove people to, that might be good value, because otherwise we couldn't get them out of the country.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if we're paying them the money and they come from Spain or they come from, which lots of our prisoners do, then that's terrible value for money, because we could remove them. But the cost of an enforced removal is probably £25,000–30,000 now.
Yeah.
So it does put that into perspective. But as you say, it's a really bad look. And if they are paying that money to prisoners that come from countries we can remove them to quite easily, well, then it's probably the wrong thing to do.
I would have thought so. Listen, David, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Nice speaking. David Wood, former Director General of Immigration Enforcement. That's the operational arm of the Home Office. He knows a thing or two about that world. It's all a bit bonkers, isn't it, when you put it all together? Look, this stuff, in fairness, predates the Labour Party. We know about the boats. They were going through the roof in terms of numbers from, 2016. I keep hearing people go, it's because of Brexit, because if you didn't have Brexit, we could send all these people back. No, you might send some of those people back. The vast majority you would never have sent back. It doesn't fundamentally change things. A tiny bit, but not an awful lot. But it's been going on, the point, it's been going on for years, this. And I think the Home Office, like all arms of government, which is where Reform UK, if they are true to their word, are popular, because they say they're not going to accept the excuse or the answer that you hear all over the place for so many different things. There's nothing else we can do. It's the way it's done. It's the way it's always been. And that's how they roll. The civil service don't like change. Believe me, they're up in arms over there at the Home Office if somebody changes the colour of the walls. They don't like it. Anything that's it means they've kind of got to work a bit for a living. And change means new policy, and new policy means more meetings, and more meetings mean working harder. It might mean that you don't get your 12 weeks holiday a year or your gold-plated pension, so you've got to stick with it. So anything for an easy life. They all take the path of least resistance. So it's easier to just carry on the status quo than to try and fundamentally change things, even things that are as unpalatable and offensive in the taxpayer's pocket of an asylum seeker going back to Afghanistan for a holiday, a place he escaped and claimed that his status as a successful asylum seeker should be granted because his safety and his life was in peril if he went back. A couple of years later, he's down at Thomas Cook booking a holiday. You can't make this up. Can you just fly to Afghanistan? Finn, can we try and book a flight to Afghanistan? And can you go tonight? So Finn, our producer, is going to see, get over there on, I don't know, lastminute.com or Expedia, one of those, one of the big boys. Let's see if we can book a flight to Kabul or wherever the hell it is that he went. 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to your calls. Ian is down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I was listening to you discussing this with Peter Barnes.
Yes.
But nobody addresses the elephant in the room.
Go on.
Afghanistan was a stable state in the 80s until the West conspired to overthrow Najibullah and ally the Soviet Union with Islamic extremists. And the same people flew the planes into the Twin Towers. We bombed Iraq on a lie. We destroyed Libya, which was the most successful medical and educational centre in Africa and was a barrier to people trafficking. We've overthrown the people in Syria.
Well, was Libya really a bastion of democracy and decency?
They had power. They had schools. They had hospitals.
They had Colonel Gaddafi as well.
Yeah. Well, do you know what they've got now? Slavery and mass murder. Literally, I'm going to think, who should I choose? Mass murder and slavery or Colonel Gaddafi? Well, I think it's a no-brainer, Ian. And we've got the there's a genocide going on, but it's in Yemen, funded by us, selling arms to Saudi Arabia. And we're complaining that people are coming here on boats. Well, hello. If you're going to destroy people's homes, they're going to come here.
Have we? All right, I hear what you're saying, and I know there's some persuasive arguments around Western intervention, particularly in the Middle East. Afghanistan has been constantly in a battle, as you know, for hundreds of years. I mean, it goes back to Alexander the Great. Goodness me, there's never been a time when that place hasn't been in this kind of curious war zone of some kind. I'm sure you know that. Some would say you are simplifying a very complex picture, Ian.
No, people who are making it sound complex are trying to hide between complex arguments, like Blair, who's a war criminal and a traitor. And the same goes for David Cameron. They're responsible for unleashing worldwide terrorism and then throwing their own servicemen under the bus. They need to go on trial, like Adolf Eichmann.
Why do they need to go? I mean, they were responding to something. This is their argument, not mine, by the way. They were responding to something far greater than 9/11 or 7/7. They were responding to a wider instability and problem in the Middle East, which they spotted was only going to get worse. Now, I don't think they've made it better, by the way, but I'm not sure they're responsible for terrorism coming out of the Middle East.
They are liars. They are liars. It's the same. They thought they could do Margaret Thatcher. Things are going wrong at home. Let's have a war abroad. But with Margaret Thatcher, we were attacked. We were attacked by a fascist power when our eyes were east on the Soviet Union. That's what happened there. We were not attacked by Iraq, and any weapons of mass destruction we knew were there because we've got the receipts, because we sold them to be used in the Iran-Iraq war. I know this because I was a nurse looking after the gas victims coming from Iran, master gas, to be treated. They are liars, they are traitors, and they are evil.
So you think the Middle East would have been a kind of hotbed of peace and decency had Bush and Blair not invaded Iraq?
Well, it wouldn't be how it is now. PBS, the American channel, described Gaddafi as a fundamentalist Muslim. He was a secular Arab leader.
He was indeed.
If they come out with that kind of nonsense,
true.
You can't believe anything.
In Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Iraq was a secular country as well in that respect. I get it. It is worth just saying as a PS to that, Ian, did you notice Sarkozy was today jailed, facing time in jail for using the Libyan campaign in the Libyan campaign financing case? So maybe from your perspective there is a little bit of justice, because of course Sarkozy and was it Sarkozy and Cameron, wasn't it, that were doing big things over there post Gaddafi in Libya. Thank you for that, Ian in London. Hey, look, there's a different view we don't often get. That's his view on the whole thing. 0344 499 1000. You can fly tonight from Stansted to, sorry, it's not our latest competition, by the way. You can fly tonight from Stansted to Istanbul to see Oasis, to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul to Kabul for 327 quid. There you go. Do you not need any paperwork for that? Like, does somebody, like, if I go to New York tomorrow, I need, what's the form you fill out to go to America? Is it the ESTA form? Do you not fill something out to go to Kabul? You might think you would do, maybe not. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
social media records, for example.
Yeah.
It's very clear that they're posting on those. They have a phone, they have access to the internet. So it shouldn't be that difficult. And why, when we find out these pieces of information, why is it only then that we look at, should this person be in the country? We should be doing that right from the start before even granting leave to remain.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Michael says, hi chap, just remove the fishing licenses, see how quick it stops. This is channel migration, of course, and it helps our waters and economy. This one from Rich, who says, how dare Boris Johnson challenge Nigel Farage for leadership at the next election? To be fair, he hasn't. He's talking about which party would. When Nigel pulled all the Reform candidates from constituencies where Conservatives were running, so as to clear the way for them, Boris would not have done anything like as well as he did if Reform had fielded candidates. Blooming cheek. That's true. Reform probably wouldn't have won them, but it would have stopped the Tory from winning them as well. That's a good point. Thank you, Rich, for that. Andy Burnham needs a reality check, says Simon. He stated he is there for Labour to fight off the Reform threat. Andy needs to understand that country comes first. He's fighting off the Reform threat, but Labour offered nothing that the British people want. It's all about party to these fools. And of course, the interesting thing is Keir Starmer has made great play of saying country first, party second. That seems to be the mantra, if you remember. Let's get a voice note. This is Sean in Grimsby.
Do I trust Reform? Not particularly, but for the first time ever, they offer something drastically different than anything we've ever seen before on the ballot box, and that's why I'm going to vote for them. Not because I trust them, because why not? We might as well just try.
It's a really good point, and something that I lay in bed thinking about this stuff, partly because I do this for a living, but also because I'm slightly fearful of the weird country I've found myself living in under this government, and to an extent under the previous government as well. And it's about proper change. You know, every party at an election will claim, you know, vote for us for change. You know, we'll make things different. Some things are different. I just sense that and I said it to our previous guest, former advisor at the Home Office, that actually I just think we're in a different place now. People are looking for something more fundamental, something more profound in the way we do business. It's the kind of sort of common sense agenda, which mandarins, love that word, mandarins at all the civil service have said, wow, you can't really change that. You can change anything if you want to. A mate of mine used to work very, very closely at the top tier in Downing Street. And I said, how much power has the Prime Minister really got? And he said, well, sort of absolute power. They can pretty much. There's obviously a system you have to go through. There's a few battles to be had. But you can make the changes you want to make. But what Prime Ministers tend to do is say, well, but I've got to go through this first, and I've got to invite these people from this department, and then we've got to clear it here and clear it there. I think that old way is becoming a thing of the past. And I don't really want the Trump kind of way, because Trump's is a bit more like China at the moment, if you notice how Trump is kind of running the game. Now, some would say that's because he ran out of patience. And I thought, no, we've got to get this thing done, the executive order thing. It doesn't always work. There's loads of court cases to contest it. But you kind of get the point. We're just fed up with going, no, it takes 12 years to do that. No, let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow. Bob's in Ludlow. Bob, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. How are you?
All right, thanks. Yeah, good as gold at this end. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think Farage will be the next Prime Minister.
Interesting.
Boris is a wet fish that will never be slapped across our faces again. But basically, Farage is an empty suit with an empty head. He's a puppet being strung by puppet masters.
Who are the puppet masters, though?
Well, Zia, what's his name?
Yusuf.
That's him. Who's the head of the party?
Well, he's head of sort of strategy, I think.
Yeah, but he's the one. I mean, this is a guy that paid £200,000 for his position in the party, basically.
Well, you can be a donor. You're very cynical.
I'm sorry, mate, but there's an awful lot happened. I used to be a Farage and Reform supporter.
Okay.
I voted for them in the general election, but I will never vote for them again over what's happened in the last year.
What specifically would you say that was, Bob? Because it's interesting you raised this point.
Because basically the way they what they did to Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib. Basically, these ideas that Farage is coming out with now about deportation and that, they weren't invented by Farage. These are ideas that Rupert Lowe put forward last year and was sacked from the party for because he refused to change his speech. Now, Ben Habib, he launches officially the Advance UK political party this weekend, and it is the fastest growing political party in history. It has now over 35,000 members, which is more than what Reform went to the polls with last year.
That's interesting. This is Advance UK, yeah?
Yeah. And Ben Habib has basically been cancelled by every mainstream media station, including yours.
He's not being cancelled.
Yes, he has. Then why haven't you had him on to talk to him? He used to be on at least 2 or 3 times a week on everybody's station when he was with
Well,
you.
I said this the other day. Ben was on with us about a month ago, I think it was, and I've not had a memo from anyone saying Ben Habib can't come on our station. Not at all. There is an argument about whether, in the same way we don't have the Green Party on, hardly at all. In fact, I can't think of the last time we had those guys on. So the relevance of a new party is interesting, and clearly doing this for a living, Bob, we're going to be speaking to that party at some point. But there's not, definitely, I would have got a memo. You know, there's 4 or 5 main presenters on this station. I would know the answer to that, and not a single person. Bosses have said to me, you can't do that.
Nobody's been interviewing them. Nobody's been interviewing Ben Habib or anybody from the party. They officially launch as a political party this coming weekend. And as I say, Ben gave 6 months to get 30,000 members to see if the British public actually wanted this, and he did it in 9 weeks. So, you know, there's got to be something. Do
you think they're likely to grow? I mean, there's lots of political parties out there. The Lib Dems don't come on with us hardly at all, and the Green Party, whatever. But do you think that Ben and Advance UK I think Reform's membership numbers are about 250,000 now. They've obviously grown that over time. You think he can reach that and go beyond that?
Reform's membership numbers are a con, basically, because what's happened is there's an awful lot of people have left Reform and gone to Advance UK because of what's happened in the last 12 months with Reform.
But it would be fair to say that Reform are, you know, in terms of membership, clearly have more members. I mean, the point is, do you think they can, whatever number we settle on in this conversation, Bob, do you think Advance UK can overtake Reform?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, what Reform aren't doing is removing the members from the list that have resigned. Because what they're saying is, oh, well, they've paid for a year, so they can stay on the list for a year. And what they're hoping is that other people will come on and replace them during that time period before that person drops off the list. Well,
we'll watch. I mean, on that particular point, we will watch with interest to see how it pans out. And we will definitely, I promise you, Bob, talk about it more on this show. 0344 499 1000. That was Bob in Ludlow. Great call from him. More calls, comments on the way. 2:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Yeah, there's interesting news about former French President Sarkozy, sentenced to 5 years in jail. He was found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a case related to millions of euros of illicit funds from the late Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi. The criminal court in Paris acquitted him of other charges. The ruling means he will spend time in jail even if he launches an appeal, which he says he intends to do. It'd be a bit bizarre, wouldn't it, being in clink with the former president? I think anyone in that position. Is there any wiggle room for him? I don't know. I remember famously him, I'm sure it was Sarkozy, ignoring him and David Cameron ignoring each other at one of those kind of Euro meetings or whatever it was. Anthony in Belfast says, Ian, do you reckon there'll be any issue getting a sun lounger in a good spot around the pool while on holiday in Afghanistan? I'm thinking you probably take your pick. This might catch on. Maybe we've inadvertently promoted the Afghan tourist industry. I'm just waiting for one of those kind of press invites that they send out and go, hey, he talks about Afghanistan in glowing terms. Let's invite him out for the weekend with a family. What could go wrong? Yeah. Now, a staggering number of Brits handed disability benefits is the headline. Labour's soft-touch welfare system has handed out disability benefits for anxiety to staggering numbers. The $3 billion crackdown doesn't go far enough, and now hard-working taxpayers are footing the bill while those with anxiety can rake in £4,900 a year. That's what the story tells us. Let's speak to a couple of voices on this. Ben Gregg from the Centre of Social Justice is with us. What's going on here, Ben? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. So what we're seeing is a continued surge in welfare, particularly for less severe mental illnesses, including mainly anxiety. So as the data says, we've seen 250 people per day getting awarded PIP, personal independence payments, for anxiety over Labour's first year in office. And we're concerned that this is showing the welfare system continuing to spin out of control.
How does this happen? Because every time I talk about this, and I'm going to speak to Dr. Raju at the moment, who's from disability and charity expert on this. Each time I speak to somebody, and he may well tell us the same thing, I'm told that if you went to your doctor and said, I've got some anxiety, there's not a cat in hell's chance you'd end up with PIP payments.
Yes, I think part of this we've got to think about is the structure of our welfare system and the incentives towards claiming health benefits, both disability and incapacity benefits. I think we have a big issue in terms of GPs and how that system is working, particularly when we're talking about kind of out of work benefits or incapacity benefits like UC Health. That if you're going to your GP with a condition, particularly a mental health illness, that you're saying might put you out of work, the amount of time they have in a given appointment to actually talk with you to try and work out what's causing that, what can be done to help you, what might be able to keep you in work, what else that's better can be done to help you rather than just putting you onto benefits, is very limited. So particularly with like how our sick note system currently works, all the incentives are kind of wrong, even for people who are trying to do good and well-intentioned things, because there's just not the space to talk about that. So one of the proposals we've made is that the sick note system should be taken out of GPs' hands and be put in a national work and health service where GPs can refer to do the actual assessment, to do the actual work, to work out how can we help you, how can we get you back into the workplace, how can we get you the support you need, rather than just a case of being put on disability or incapacity benefits.
I mean, in fairness to Labour, they did say we're going to try and tackle this, and of course they gave it a good go on the welfare system, and their backbenchers went, no, you can't do that, and they kind of had their tail between their legs and cancelled it all, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the new Secretary of State, Pat McFadden, is making very good noises about this. We're particularly concerned by the fact that there's almost 1 million young people who are now not in education, employment or training, and particularly within that group, the increase of young people who are in that category because they're sick And Pat McFadden has been talking about this. He's been talking about getting those numbers down. But the problem is at the minute matching those warm words with actual action that will do that. And that's where the gap is within the government at the minute.
We will watch with interest. Ben, thank you. Ben Gregg, Centre for Social Justice. Let's speak to Dr. Amo Raju, disability and charity expert. Good afternoon to you, Amo. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be with you.
Well, I made the point to Ben just then, which I'm sure you'd agree with. I can't just go, like, for example, today I've got to drop a man flu. You know, as a fellow male, you know what that's like. It's not pleasant, and therefore I'm not feeling great. But here I am at work, giving it a good go. If I went to my doctor this afternoon, to my GP, and said, actually, it's a bit more than that, doctor. I'm actually feeling quite anxious. I think I've got anxiety. Not depression, not bipolar or anything like that, just some anxiety. I got a funny feeling I'm not going to be given a PIP payment anytime soon.
Yeah, you're right, and there is a qualifying time period as well. I think, I mean, I've not done disability benefits support for a while myself personally, but there used to be a 3-month lead-in, so you can't just turn up on at a GP appointment, say I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed.
Yeah.
I want to apply for PIP. It doesn't work like that. Absolutely not. My thing here is that we need to look at the root causes of why people are feeling anxious, why people are feeling depressed. We've just not long come out of a pandemic, which for a lot of younger people, I'm not going to use the pandemic as an excuse, but it is certainly something to consider. A lot of younger people have lost a lot of confidence, and there's a whole generation that is more connected to its phone and PC than it is socially to friends and extended circles. Excuse me. So there's a lot of work to be done in society in terms of getting people confident, feeling good about themselves, and feeling able to feel equal in applying for jobs and then retaining those jobs, and at the same time talking to employers about what they could be doing in terms of looking at their workforce.
But have we, sorry to interject, but do you think, and this is what Ben, our previous guest, not unreasonably said, look, he thinks perhaps the system takes the path of least resistance. It's so convoluted, it's time dependent, and whether it's the GP, whether it's the DWP, nobody has that amount of time. And simultaneously, perhaps young people in particular have sort of recalibrated or reimagined what depression is. And that's not to underplay what people feel, but feeling anxious and having a bad day. Have we almost redefined that predisposition to become sort of a full-blown issue where you've got something that actually most people get from time to time?
I think it's like with anything, 10 years ago, as a country, as a society, we weren't talking about mental health and anxiety as much as we are today. So it's out there in the news. So there's a whole generation of people waking up to this conversation around mental health. So there will be some self-diagnosis. There will be some people who, but equally, there's a lot of people who are anxious and depressed and going through what I call having a relationship with depression and mental health, because it fluctuates. There's no such thing as a cure. Even antidepressants do not cure anxiety and mental health.
But can there be that many? I mean, that seems to be the argument, which I know you're familiar with, and I'm sure you even understand it, where people go, I mean, yeah, of course, we all hated lockdown. It was when you look back at it, it's actually quite frightening. You have to stop thinking about it because we remember what we couldn't do, and those journeys that you did make in the car, and there was nothing on the road at prime time daytime, and it was horrible and awful, and nobody disputes that would have had an awful effect on people, particularly those that didn't even have a garden to go walking around in. So we all get that, but I think there's an understandable, not even a suspicion, but concern, shall we say, that surely we haven't, in a few short years of this human journey of ours, suddenly found ourselves with over 1 million more people who have clinical depression.
No, but there is a lot of anxiety out there, and there's a lot of good reason for people to be anxious as well, and that leads to other conditions. You know, there's a strong connection between mental and physical disability. You know, it can manifest itself in physical kind of physical ways. You can start to feel physically weaker as well, and so, you know, it's not a case that there's a lot more people out there who are self-diagnosing, or there are a lot of more people who are suddenly saying I'm depressed because that's what the trend is. It's simply because there's a lot of anxiety out there, and I think back to what I said earlier, we've got to get to the root cause of why people are feeling this way. You know, whether it's poor income, whether it's social isolation, whether it's, you know, people staying at home and choosing to work from home instead of getting back to the office. Some of those kind of solutions need to be put back into the mix by employers. And one of the things I also say is that we need more disability charities having that conversation with DWP. And I know that was something that came out in the last statement by the government, that they will involve disability organisations when they're looking at welfare reform. But, you know, they're the best people to help get people back into work and get people off benefits if they don't need to be off benefits, because, you know, normally they're run by disabled people themselves, and they're the best experts in assisting. So I think that's a strong argument to be put forward to the next time this conversation, and, you know, the next time, it happens all the time, the conversation continues, but you know, we need more and more conversations with disability organisations, user-led organisations, to talk to the DWP and the government directly on such issues.
Yeah, no, well, on that point, it certainly sounds fair enough. Listen, Amo, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Dr. Amo Raju, disability and charity expert. I think something else is going on here. I don't dispute that, because you can't just rock up and go, I've got depression. You have got to jump through some hoops and hurdles, and I know I'm going to get a flurry of people saying, wow, I am depressed and I can't get pit for love nor money and I really need it, and I'm not making it up. I don't think people are making it up as such. There may be the odd case, in the same way as people used to make up having a bad back. I just think we've now reached a point of no return when it comes to how we define anxiety and depression. I genuinely believe that. I think it's, yeah, the lockdown thing was part of it. I think young people's expectations of life is another part of it. I think social media can provide some of the answers to how we kind of got there. There's a constant carrot being dangled about what your life could be like, etc., etc. And I also think affordability in the Western world. You know, you'll look at a future, and when I was at school, which seems like half an hour ago, no, it doesn't actually, it seems like about 3 weeks ago, but you take the point, there wasn't really an analysis of, not too far in the future, of, you know, you just thought at some point, I'm going to, if you had to think, you didn't really think about it much at all, but if you had to think about it, at some point you go, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to get a job, and I'll probably meet somebody at some point, maybe we'll get married and probably get a house together. I think if you ask a younger person now to think about that same scenario, they would probably stop at the point when you talked about getting a house. And that, of course, is a bigger statement than just the physical house. It's a statement about affordability and your entire future. Can I afford to, what sort of world am I going to live in, where a minimum wage job is going to give me literally nothing? It's just a guaranteed ticket to constantly live with my parents till I'm fit. I think that factor is big on this. So you put all of that together, the sort of new world we've arrived in the last 10, 20 years. I said, so maybe we need to give another name to this phenomenon. I genuinely think that's what's going on. So yeah, people are racked off. People are feeling anxious. They're feeling perturbed. They're feeling that there's an injustice maybe. Of course, there are millions of other young people who say, do you know what, I'm going to get out there and do it, and I will buy a house. And there's lots of young people who do still buy houses. And if you look at the numbers, you'll see the figures are there to see. Under 30s are still buying houses in their droves every single week. Just perhaps not as a proportion as often as they used to. So something's going on. Not sure what it is, not sure how you define it. Maybe it needs a new name. There's something out there that is happening. But it's not a case of people are depressed in that conventional sense. Is that a reasonable analysis of what is happening? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
While Reform are in the ascendancy and they're ahead in the polls, Boris still has an appeal to the exact target voters that Reform are going for. Those people that perhaps voted Labour for a long time, then they voted for Brexit, then they voted for Boris in 2019. They're disappointed with the government, they're disappointed with the Tories, but Boris is the one that could, upset the Reform apple cart. So almost like sort of Van Helsing, they're sort of trying to drive a stake into Boris is down and out, but they just want to really make sure he's not coming back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 0344 499 1000. I think we're on day 8, aren't we, of The Voice of Doom? Day 9, even. Man alive. This is building. This one's going to be an absolute... But it's miserable if you think you know who it is but got it wrong. I apologise. The world doesn't stop because of this particular feature. It's a mystery voice. A mystery voice thing, but it's political. OK, so you're looking for a politician. Could be recent, could be years ago, could be dead, could be alive. Who is this?
Got off to a pretty messy start.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. It is not... What have been some of the regular ones we've had over the last couple of days? We'll get a few regulars. It's not Ian Duncan Smith. It is not. There's been a few keep coming up. Nonetheless, no one's got it right. Here's the voice again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
And again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
87222. If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. Back to your calls. Carl is in Liverpool. Carl, what have you got for us? Boris Johnson. He says you can only trust the Conservatives. What do you think?
Well,
that's a great response.
To be honest,
we could just clip that little bit up.
Yeah, that laugh wouldn't have come out unless you said it that way. So,
yeah, I like it.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, but he's really mistaken, because I think the British public have turned their backs on the Tories and are about to really turn their backs on Labour going forward.
But he can't. I mean, you're in Liverpool, Carl. Boris Johnson did. There's only 2 Tories I can think that partially conquered Liverpool. I don't know what age you are, Carl.
I'm 45.
Right, so you might remember this. Michael Heseltine.
I do.
Do you remember what he did? You know, and he was kind of the man that was talking about reinvigorating Liverpool and all that goes with it. Now, you might not agree with what he did, but he certainly scored a few points where no one else ever did. And Boris Johnson kind of made a few incursions in Liverpool.
I mean...
A Tory in red Liverpool. Come on.
I know. Well, I think what it was, I think more people got a bit more sensible and started voting for policies rather than heritage of the family voting and stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think a lot of people still do that, you know, but I think that's changed now, Ian, if I'm honest, because of what Labour have done. There's a lot of people who are obviously joining Reform. I'm a member of Reform. There's a lot of people going to vote.
I think you're right. I come from, you know, exactly the same backstory as you're talking about there. You know, everybody were Labour voters. You know, Dad's family were dockers in Grimsby. You know, that's how it worked, right? You just voted as your family did. But I think it's changed now. It's not about party, is it? It's about a different kind of set of desires and needs.
Well, people are actually taking note now of what policies mean and what people and what politicians
100%.
are saying.
Yeah.
Because obviously we live in a world now where everything's filmed and photographed and recorded. People are now actually taking notice, where a lot of people did. I think Peter said a long time ago on Kevin's show that people, you know, when we were trying to look for blame and politicians, he said, well, a lot of, you know, we've been walking around with our eyes closed for years, and it's taken till now for people to actually speak up about the immigration thing. You know, we haven't done anything as a country. But my argument with people, that's not our fault. The politicians are meant to lead the way. Yeah. So, like, Labour now, I think, have finished here in the northwest, because the government really doesn't do a lot for the northwest of England.
Don't we all say that, though, wherever we live? Because there was always that sort of, you know, people would go, oh, they do nothing, unless you're in London, they don't do anything. And, you know, London's got some of the poorest boroughs in Europe, let alone the UK. I mean, it's always that belief that, you know, the people, believe it or not, in Sevenoaks, leafy Sevenoaks, where I live, Carl, have the same view. They don't do anything for us here. The roads are rubbish. Nothing runs on time.
If I may, as well, just add to that, the Labour, Andy Burnham, going in for maybe trying to outseat Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy needs to sort Manchester out before he does that, because Manchester isn't a really nice place to be or go and visit anymore because of what they're experiencing, the people of Manchester experience. And I'm sure if you get people from Manchester calling up...
Well, our next, Alan, we're going to talk to Alan next. He's in Salford, so, yeah, Greater Manchester. He can answer that. Carl, brilliant. Thank you for that. Love the call. Carl in Liverpool, Alan's in Salford. People don't want to go to Manchester anymore. Alan, what do you think?
Yeah, well...
Hi.
I remember Andy Burnham's first term, if we want to talk about Andy Burnham first.
Go on.
Yeah, he nearly had a strike with all these taxi drivers.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
He wanted to be another Mr. Khan, didn't he?
Yeah. He kind of laid off that in the end, didn't he?
Yeah, he had to get away from that because people were in uproar here.
Yeah.
Well, I live in Salford. We have a different council in Manchester, thank God.
Of course.
But I wouldn't. No, it's just a chancer, another chance, I'm afraid, for Labour.
So what do you reckon, Boris Johnson, then, talking of chances?
Well, I'm really annoyed. Well, not annoyed with him. He's got a cheek, hasn't he? He's got some nerve, you know, saying that reforms, you know, danger to national security.
Yeah, only the Conservatives are the answer, he says, Al.
Yeah, the Conservatives have finished. He had an 80 majority, didn't he? He couldn't get Brexit through because of his own party was battling against him, voting against him.
Yeah.
So, you know, no, he's finished, I'm afraid.
So,
but there's another point I'd like to talk about is reform. Now, they should never have let Nadine Dorrit go into the reform. This Krug, I think, is a good fella because he knows about the government as well. Nadine Dorrit spit a dummy out when she couldn't go in the House of Lords. You know,
so you think she's... do you think she's also too associated with Boris Johnson or the old Conservatives?
Oh, without doubt. But she'd done 20 years as an MP, nice pension, and she wanted to be pensioned off in the House of Lords, and she spit a dummy out. I think she's she's an awful woman, I'm sorry to say.
She speaks well of you, Alan, I should say.
Yeah, well...
Listen, great call. Thank you, Al. That's Alan in Salford. Lots to talk about Boris Johnson, the Boris wave, the Boris return. Well, no one's advocating that, or even he's not saying it, but he is saying that the Conservatives, when push comes to shove on issues like security, the economy, reform are not the answer. Only the Conservatives are the answer, he says. What do you make of that? Can you trust reform over the Tories or the other way around? 0344 499 1000. We've got the Voice of Doom coming up. Here's the voice.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. Right now the time is 3 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the home of common sense, and welcome back. Loads to get through. We'll tell you more about the Voice of Doom. Exciting news on the Voice of Doom. That's coming a little bit later. But Boris Johnson launching a blistering attack on Reform UK, branding the party a danger to Britain's economy and national security. He was appearing on Harry Cole Saves the West right here on Talk. He accused Farage's party of disabling Britain's future at a time when strong leadership was needed. Your thoughts on that? Can you trust Reform over the Tories or Tories over the Reform? Lines are open. Also this afternoon, the Afghan asylum seeker who claimed to flee Taliban threats and death has sparked outrage after returning to Afghanistan for a summer holiday. Social media posts revealed the individual visiting tourist hotspots, raising questions about the exploitation of the UK's asylum system. The current Home Secretary apparently is not very happy. And tech correspondent Sean Keach returns with all of the new top tech stories, including YouTube creators adding, are you ready for this, £2.2 billion to the UK economy. Trump securing a TikTok deal, Apple warning of privacy risks under new laws, and Zuckerberg launching his new AI-powered Meta smart glasses. Are you ready for a pair of those beauties? I certainly am. 0344 499 1000. I might be wearing them now. I might be testing out the beta version. Who knows? Nobody would have a clue. They're that good. You don't know where I'm getting my information from. From my specs. This comes in from Brad in Cambridge. Reference anxiety. He says, regarding anxiety, any doctor worth his salt wouldn't be treating this himself. He'd be referring patients to a therapist. As a retired psychotherapist myself, I can tell you the treatment for anxiety has a high success rate, and there is no need for anybody to be on long-term sickness or PIP for it. Yeah, it's that distinction. Thank you, Brad. That distinction, I suppose, between, you know, having anxiety, which is very real. Lots of us have that from time to time. You know, it might be more common in some individuals than others. But that isn't something that ordinarily I think you would initially diagnose as a disability, requiring... Now, if you move into, you know, a different level of anxiety and you start to get into the sort of sphere of depression, then that's a whole different story. But I think you take the point. Brad, thank you very much indeed for that. Wendy says that was the most honest and reasonable discussion I've heard on the subject of anxiety and PIP. Thank you very much, Wendy, for that. Interesting one here from Andy, who says, I helped a pal with PIP some years ago, a wheelchair user under 3 hospitals with 500 pages of medical evidence and grueling in-person assessments that contained fabrications. She was initially rejected. It finally got through with an appeal and an MP help, which is kind of the point I was making. That's the bit that I think confuses us in the story, that more and more people are getting PIP for anxiety, and yet at the same time you hear these kind of stories from people saying, well, actually, it's really hard to get, it's not easy to just get, and certainly saying I'm feeling a bit off ain't going to get you anywhere. It's a story I'm sure we shall return to. Let's look at this one then. Andy Burnham eyeing another Labour leadership bid, apparently claiming MPs secretly back him to oust Keir Starmer. He's pushing radical policies like a 50p tax rate, higher council taxes on southern homes, and state control of housing, energy, water and rail. Didn't Keir Starmer say some of this kind of stuff before the election? Let's speak to Emma Burnell, editor of Labour List. Afternoon to you, Emma.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to have you on with us again. I mean, he did, didn't he? Keir Starmer was talking about nationalising this, that and the other and goodness knows what else. And Andy Burnham, I mean, I think a lot of people are forgetting, maybe Andy himself is forgetting, but you have to go through the slightly tricky process of becoming an MP before you can go for the big job. What are you making of the overarching situation here? Because clearly something is brewing over there.
There's definitely something brewing. I mean, Andy Burnham has been talked about pretty much incessantly as a potential king over the water. And Labour does love a king over the water. For a long time, it was David Miliband. Now it's Andy Burnham. Yeah. The problem is that water might be choppier to navigate back from than people are really sort of thinking about. I've overstretched that metaphor there, but basically he'd need to get a seat in Parliament. To do that, he'd need to be approved as a candidate by the NEC, who are, you know, pretty much close to Keir Starmer and his leadership. If Starmer was like, why would I let this guy come in my house and just to challenge me, you could see why he might not want that. And there'd be perfectly, you know, valid reasons to say, actually, we don't want a by-election right now. We certainly don't want a by-election plus a by-election for the Greater Manchester mayoralty. You know, we want to be just getting on with things. So that's like quite a big hurdle. And even then, there are other hurdles that he would have to get over in order to get to the point where he could challenge Keir Starmer. And then he'd have to win over the membership. And while I think he probably does have a pretty popular profile with the members, it's worth remembering that about a quarter of Labour members live in London and possibly don't necessarily respond so well to some of the I mean, you could probably tell from my accent, I'm one of them. Yeah, some of the rhetoric that Andy can slip into. So he'll have to do some quite serious work to be not just the King of the North, but the leader of the whole country.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that Andy Burnham must know all of this as well. I mean, he's not, he's been a senior cabinet minister, he was the health secretary and other posts as well. He knows that, there are many barriers. He must know that Keir Starmer isn't going to want 2 by-elections, one for mayoral, one for, an MP. And he's also going to know that Keir Starmer wouldn't want to surely put anybody into a position, not that it's technically Keir Starmer's decision, but it kind of would be, that's going to compromise him.
Of course he knows. I mean, Andy's a very, very clever man. He's done a really good job as Mayor of Manchester. And he must have sort of weighed the odds and decided that now is the right time to take the risk. No risk, no reward, I guess. And, there is quite a big reward if it comes off in his favour. And he is, as I say, he is very popular amongst Labour members. When we do polling, he often comes out very high. Yeah. And that's also true of Labour voters and of voters across the country. He has pretty good recognition. He's very fluent on the media. He's got a good profile.
I wonder how much it translates outside of Labour members in that respect. He was, we all remember him as this kind of fairly young cabinet minister. I've sort of joked recently that when he first came on the scene, as you say, he's always been very fluent, he's very media friendly. The first time I saw him put a pair of glasses on, he looked like, one of those, he's the man that looks cool in glasses. 2 decades on, he's the man who looks like he needs glasses, and that's an age comment, I suppose. He's kind of slightly lost that verve of being the kind of young buck, as I remember him, and maybe to some people still looks like a kind of middle-aged, stale establishment politician.
I would say, he is younger than Nigel Farage, so I don't think age is necessarily about how cool someone is. Lots of people, sadly to my opinion, but obviously that's just my opinion, think that Nigel Farage is cool. I think Andy Burnham's, got a certain joie de vivre about him. He is quite, he's an attractive man of a certain age, and those of us who are also of a certain age...
Sorry, were you talking about Burnham or Farage then when you said he's an attractive man? Just to clarify.
Please let me clarify that that's Andy Burnham. And, of course, yourself, Ian.
Of course, yeah. Indeed. I think I'm younger than both, but maybe one. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that Burnham is on the scene. He's, some would say, on manoeuvres, Emma.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to say that, given that he's had the big interview with The Telegraph and the big profile in The New Statesman, which will be, handed out, I believe, free at conference. So that picture of him on the front of the magazine will be absolutely all over the conference. That doesn't happen by accident.
That's very true. That doesn't happen by accident. Are you looking forward to the conference?
Yes, I am. I'm, as you know, I'm fairly new in post. I'm really looking forward to my first conference as editor of Labour List. We've got a fantastic range of events coming up. And much as these conferences can feel from the outside, A, baffling, and B, a bit fighty and a bit fiery, actually 90% of it will be Labour people coming together, seeing friends they haven't seen for a year, and catching up. And sometimes that can actually go better for the leadership than the external media might think it's going to.
I wonder if conferences are what they used to be, or do we just, again, maybe it's an age thing of just looking back through rows. I was a sucker for a political speech, Emma. It didn't matter who was making it. I was going to vote for them at the next election. It could be screaming Lord Such, could be anybody at all, because everybody sounds great. I remember David Cameron in like 2009 or 2008 talking about, what the plans were for the sort of new Conservatives. Equally, I can remember Tony Blair, just before he came into office, sort of throwing things out. This morning we had meetings with British Telecom and others, and I thought, wow, this is like, and this was in opposition. It sounded serious, and these were very powerful speeches from both of those men, and they were both quite good, of course, at speaking. So I'm a bit of a sucker for them. I don't want to get seduced by Keir Starmer at the weekend and suddenly become an old lefty.
Well, I mean, you may well. This is going to have to be, I think Keir Starmer's under a lot of pressure. He's going to have to be a really, really good speech. But he has actually delivered very, very good conference speeches before. that's something where it sort of works to his barrister nature. He can, make and deliver an argument really fluidly. Speeches like that are actually where he flourishes. It's in the more sort of off the cuff stuff that he's less good.
Where do you think Morgan McSweeney will still be alongside him come the weekend?
Come the weekend, yes. I can't imagine that he'll lose Morgan that quickly. Morgan's clearly under a lot of pressure. I don't know him personally. I think there's two stories there. There's the guy who delivered the strategy that got Labour not only elected, but elected with a whopping landslide. And somebody who we have seen struggle perhaps in other roles since.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't think, and I said this earlier to our guest, Emma, I don't think the McSweeney stuff quite penetrates in terms of the zeitgeist as Angela Rayner or Mandelson or any of that stuff. It feels like it's a little distant to cause irreparable damage. So they might ride it out between them.
I think if you were to ask for a comparison, it's like when Zia Youssef resigned very briefly from Reform. Within political circles, within SW1, people like you and me were like, oh my God, that's huge, that's amazing. In the pub, no one was talking about Zia Youssef resigning from Reform. The people who work behind the scenes, the people who aren't on the telly all day, every day, people just don't pick up on who they are. Very, very occasionally someone breaks through. Alistair Campbell might be a good example of that. But Alistair Campbell, if you remember, actually resigned when he became the story.
Yeah, which was always his kind of measure, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I asked my sister if she knew who Morgan McSweeney was, and she said, "Is he a Dickens character?" He does. He does sound like he might. Is it Tale of Two Cities or is it Oliver Twist?
It's got a slightly Dickensian twist, yes.
It really has, hasn't it? Listen, Emma, great to have you on as ever. Thank you, Emma. But enjoy the weekend as well. Enjoy the conference. Emma Burnell, editor at Labour List, our go-to reasonable voice of left-wing politics that we like to speak to from time to time. Burnham is interesting. Don in Chelmsford said Andy Burnham's manicured eyebrows deserve a national audience. Yeah, they probably do. Martin in Nottinghamshire says Burnham will be as bad as Starmer. Labour is finished. It's time for a fresh start and new leadership. I think he's out the same cloth, isn't he, really? I mean, Burnham was... He always looked... I don't know how old... Can we check how old Andy Burnham is? I always... When he first sort of appeared in the Blair cabinet and he was health secretary and, he was... He's 55, OK, so he's in my age group, 55, and he was 90. I don't know when he was health secretary, but health secretary in the mid to 90s to early 2000. When was he health secretary? 2009, so 15 years ago. So he was 40, and a young-looking 40, bit like me in that respect, and he looked like. Yeah, this is what politics needs. People who look a bit like that. People who've got, a little bit of an accent that doesn't put them in the kind of Oxbridge establishment. So he looked the part, but he is now 55, and I don't say that as a criticism. That should make him more qualified for the job. It's just interesting how someone who's been there a long time does begin to form part of that kind of thought. When you think establishment, you think of people like that. We'll do the voice of doom in just a second. Andy's in Hampshire. Reference that question about who you can trust, Reform or Conservatives. Andy, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, I wouldn't trust Conservatives. Reform all the way. They've had a chance to do their stuff. They haven't done anything. So, time for new broom.
New broom. All right, fair enough. Short and sweet. New broom. I like it. Thank you very much, Andy. Where does that broom, or who does that broom sweep up along the way? Voice of doom. This is the voice we played you.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who is that? These are some of the guesses. It's not Jeffrey Archer. That comes up quite a lot, Jeffrey Archer. I think that's the one I was thinking of. Brian Gould, no. Michael Fabricant, David Owen, David Steele, Matthew Parris, no. You forget Matthew Parris was a Tory MP for, I think, one Parliament. Peter Murrell, John Redwood, Hilary Benn, Daniel Hannan, Paul's ex-wife at the start of their divorce trial. Who's Paul? Is that what he messaged? Oh, right, OK. Well, Yes, it's the right answer. It is. George Osborne, no, we haven't got a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow, day 10 and the voice of doom. We're back with more of your calls coming in a couple of moments' time. This is Talk.
Hello, Jezza.
You all right?
I'm good.
Yeah,
What are you
did you
doing?
drink?
I've had my drink.
Well, I've been running around.
I'm ready now.
I'm sure you are.
Should we start the show?
No, we can't. Saturday the 15th of November, here's a promise. You will not have seen anything like it. You will get honesty, you will get authenticity, and if we get our way, you might even get a cram in at the top. 3-tier, World of Common Sense with Mike Graham.
And Jeremy Kyle.
In that order.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. We really should play the outtakes during the break, shouldn't we? There's a whole podcast in that. I think I've told you this before. There used to be a radio station in America that would play, whoever was answering the phones, they would play those conversations and make them into a separate show that once a week. Because you can only imagine, we put some great callers on air, but you can only imagine what sometimes you have to get through to get people calling for all sorts of things, It's an extraordinary situation. So there can be some frustration in that, but also some entertainment. Let's go to Les in Colchester. Les, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian.
Hiya.
Thanks for taking the call.
Pleasure.
Just a quick one about the younger generation having anxiety and trouble getting work in their future.
Yeah.
I put it basically down to poor parenting. I'm lucky enough to have a almost 16-year-old son that works 3 nights a week in a chip shop, works at a festival every month.
Nice.
Boxing twice a week. Since the age of 7, we've talked about work and life and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be a pilot, but now he's 6'2" at 16. He's too big to be a pilot, so he decided he wants to jump out of planes rather than fly them. So we've supported him for everything he's done. We took him to the army base at Harrogate this year.
Wow.
We took him here. We took him there. All of his money that he earns £420 a month, goes straight into his pot. That's sitting there ready for him.
Oh, I love that.
Any anxieties, we talk, we express. We are constantly a house where we are involved in life and himself. Any anxieties, he talks about. We build him up. We give him the strength.
Yeah.
I think parents need to put their phone down, stop being so social media orientated, and actually remember that it's about putting time into your children. And if you show anxiety and laziness, your kids are going to be lazy and anxious. You need to give them resilience, show them a good day.
That's really true. That's really true.
Also, I tell him every day, it's like a book. You're working through chapters. Some chapters are going to be bad, some chapters are going to be good.
Yeah.
But the parent has to teach a child, not the child just crumble and the parent go, I don't know what to do. You've got to put it into them.
100%, 100%. My little boy's just started secondary school, and I was explaining to him that some of the best friends he'll have in life, he hasn't yet met, and he couldn't quite get his head around that. But we were having that conversation that you do about the kind of, you just talked about chapters, Les, you know, the stages of life and how things change, and, you know, how, you know, also how we're always there for him, you know, whatever happens, doesn't matter what it is. Since he was about 4, I've always said, you know, we used to have this thing, if you're feeling sad, talk to mum and dad, you know, that kind of thing, which wasn't some kind of bizarre sort of hippie-like phrase. It just happened to rhyme. So I said it one day and it kind of stuck. And obviously there's going to be times when kids go through, you know, their own sort of hurdles. Of course there is, you know, they've got puberty and all that business. But what you've just said there is brilliant, especially the bit about saving some money. I mean, it sounds old-fashioned now, doesn't it?
I'm quite a strict Edwardian old grumpy father.
Yeah, you sound it, Les. I'm surprised you're even on the radio, frankly.
I am very straight, very grumpy with him, but he respects that. He tolerates it, but he respects it. On the flip side of that, is when he comes home and gives me the money and says, do you want housekeeping? I go, no, I'm putting all of it away because up until you're 18, I pay for everything.
Yeah.
So any money you earn goes towards your future. But we'll put your money towards your provisional driving licence. You pay for that, you've earned it.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a £150 tracksuit, I'll pay half.
Yep.
So he gets a good education, a good thought process around money and his future.
It's so essential, isn't it?
Parents have to be so simple. Yeah. But he went out knocking on doors, asking for jobs himself.
Love
he
that
didn't
as
have
well.
A job.
That's
he went
brilliant.
To a chip shop, and they phoned him up as his first person.
Yeah. That was my job when I was at school, by the way, Les, working in a chippy. So I get that. I loved every bit of it as well. It's fantastic.
It's making me fat though, because he brings the food.
Well, yeah, you don't. That's the great thing. At the end of the night, I'd bring home all sorts: 7 cods, 18 sausages. And Mum was going, "Well, don't need all of this." Yeah, there was that. By the way, something you said at the beginning. You said he's 6'2". Is there a height maximum for being a pilot?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Makes sense.
It's not the height. It's when you do the interview. He was so passionate. He'd done 18 months in the RAF cadets, and he just go in, getting everything ready, and flown the plane. When we spoke to the corporals and the NCOs, they said it's not his height, it's his legs. When you pull the ejector, your legs can't be left behind because the start of the seat, it will leave your legs behind over a certain.
Wow, so it's a leg issue.
Yeah, because they can't make the planes like cars.
That makes.
They make the single suit average size pilots, and then everyone else moves around it. So he decided he's going to jump out of planes and
join the army.
Yeah, and we've been at the Harrogate. He's also been down the army. They took him on, exceptional. He
Fantastic.
phones every week and says, "Yeah, I'm still coming. Anything I need to know."
Yeah.
He's on it, and when he talks about it, he's very passionate about it.
Yeah, I love it. Les, you've been great. You don't sound moody or miserable at all, by the way. I love it. Les in Colchester, thank you, mate, for that. And what a great example of fatherhood and parenthood. I hope I can do as well. Matthew in Cheshire. Matthew, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. Good afternoon. So, Boris has been rolled out.
Yeah.
Burnham's been rolled out. What are they going to do? They're going to dig up Churchill and Lloyd George next to fight back Farage. Come on. The only thing I've got to say is that I'm a big Reform fan, and I get everything about the immigration and getting rid of him, but I want to know everyday politics now. I want to know what the Reform are going to do for me, the child's education, the military, the National Health Service, because they're just coming across a little bit one-horse pony. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I want to know what they're going to do when they get in power. It's not all just Farage. Bring the people out. Who they're going to put in place.
So that it's not. So you're not working on the basis that I don't care. I'm just going to vote for them. You want to know a bit more.
I do want to know a bit more because they're going to be there for 4 or 5 years, and I hope they are there. And I know they're going to bring businesses in because, obviously, politicians are career politicians. They've never really got their hands dirty. They've never been on a building site.
Yep.
They've never been in a boardroom. They've just gone to university. They've been in big Westminster bubble. And they don't know absolutely nothing about the big wide world. They just where I do know Reform are going to do that, and you know that they're going to bring people in, and the Tories and Labour are going to go digging in on people and finding out shady little past like they do. And I just want, I've got a 9-year-old, I've got a 16-year-old who wants to become a nurse. What's the pathway? My son's got Crohn's disease, so if he needs the medication, he's going to be waiting 12 months to go and see a doctor.
Sure.
I want to know, what they're going to do with my pensions, what they're going to do with my council tax. I want to know that everyday stuff because they need to do that, but they need to do it carefully because obviously Labour, Lib Dems, and they're going to dig into them. They're going to, they're really going to go to town, and they need to be watertight.
There's going to be watertight is the right word as well. And listen, great call, Matthew. Thank you for that. And I love what Matthew said there. That it's not just blindly going, I'm going to give this. We should never have that. Remember, the default position we should all have. Which is why I kind of hate the hero worship of anyone, whether it's those that love Keir Starmer or what's his name, Corbyn. The Corbynites look at Corbyn in the same way as Trump supporters look at Trump. There's almost no difference in the psychology that is employed to make those kind of often ridiculous statements about the trust factor, the honesty, the integrity, the decency, the intention, the caring. The list goes on. It's the same psychology. No one should ever have that feel about a politician. It's not a football team. It's not your favourite singer or stand-up comedian. These are people that want to run your life. Your default position should be to not trust them until they can prove otherwise. 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. We'll talk science and tech. Sean Keach joining us next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 3:30. Sean Keach is back with us, Head of Science and Technology at The Sun. Always good to see you, Sean. In fact, you've been to America more times than Louis Theroux in the last couple of weeks, haven't you? You've been out there, you've been back and forth, you come home for a couple of days and then go back again.
It's been non-stop.
You've been to Facebook, you've been to...
Yeah, I've been to Meta for Facebook, WhatsApp, Apple. Instagram, been to Apple. And it's just September. September's non-stop. Everyone's rushing to get out all of their gadgets, all of their apps for Christmas, Black Friday. So I'm out there non-stop, and, you know, it might sound like a treat, but it's very confusing, very long days, trying to pass all this information from all these tech companies.
Indeed. And there is a point when you can get fed up with aeroplanes, isn't there? I mean, I'm pretty sure, you know, when you're you get the job as the Foreign Secretary, and that job is mostly sitting on aeroplanes. And I reckon after about 3 weeks, in one of the most senior jobs on the planet, you probably go, I am really fed up with this.
You know what? I used to like airplanes before they started getting Wi-Fi, because then it was like, I can just really switch off. But now I get emails coming through, I get texts coming through.
But you don't have to sign up for it.
It's true. It's there. It's, you know, I want to text my wife, see how the
I did it last time. I was like a kid with a new gadget last time. That was on a flight to the States, and I thought, I'm going to give this a go. It did stop working about 2/3 of the way through the flight.
Yes.
Never got any money back. It would only been about £1.70 I was due back. But it is quite weird. You think, I'm on an aeroplane and I can use everything.
But then it cuts off, and then your family starts panicking. They're like, oh, the texts aren't going through. What's happened?
Oh, that's a good point. Never thought about that.
Scary stuff.
Scary stuff. Let's talk about a story that's literally just broke in The Sun. Great story from Martina Bett in The Sun about, and this is the headline, and we'll probably talk about this at more length on tomorrow's programme. All UK adults will need a digital ID card under Labour's plans to crack down on illegal migration. Digital ID. The second bit, by the way, I have to say, I know you won't say this, Sean, because it's not your job to have these big opinions on the half-wits that run our country, but the last bit is going to crack down on illegal immigration is nonsense. It won't do that. However, the digital ID bit is definitely been on the radar for a long time.
For decades.
Yeah.
Digital IDs. I mean, Tony Blair was talking about digital IDs back in the day. You know, this is a really long-running thing. I think now we're at a stage where actually it's probably relatively implementable. I mean, in the US, they're already using it for some driver's licenses in some states, because your phone has the capacity to have a digital ID.
Yeah.
So they want to do this in the UK. It's sort of being dubbed Brick Card. I mean, who knows what it's actually going to be called, but we should find out all the details tomorrow. It's basically, the idea is that employers will basically be able to scan your digital ID, see if you're employable, and then make sure that you're not, you know, here illegally.
Yes.
Whether that transpires and works as intended, I suspect probably it will cost us a lot of money. Will it go wrong? I don't know. I will say, actually, that generally I'm very impressed by UK government websites. I lived in the US for a bit, and government websites there are extremely difficult to navigate. And, you know, I think when you go onto, like, NHS or student finance, it tends to be quite easy to navigate here. So, I mean, that gives me a little bit of confidence, but when you look at a lot of projects that the government runs, you know, the astronomical fees. So.
They are. I went on, I've told this story before, a couple of months ago for the first time, but I went back the other day onto the HMRC website. So you put in your own details, and if you're self-employed, which I am, you... and then it tells you literally how there's a pie chart of where your tax went and what it spent, and how much went to the NHS, how much went to immigration. That's an eye-watering number. How much went to defence? It's literally written there from your own money.
See how many tanks we're buying.
Exactly, yeah. You bought 3 Sherman tanks and a rifle last year. And then last week I was having a look at it again. I was just on the train. I thought, what else is on this thing? And it tells you how much your pension, well, your state pension is worth.
Oh, wow.
When you retire. So it gives you your retirement date, which we all know technically what our legal retirement date could be. Obviously, I'm about 3 decades away from that. And it tells you, you know, you will be entitled, I think it was like, you know, 250 quid a week or something for stay. But it was that precise. I think it said something like £250.47 or something. It was really precise stuff.
And it's, I just find that the websites are all very easy to log into, easy to manage when you're checking your tax, when you're checking your pension, any of that stuff, very simple.
But we are being barcoded. That's what's happening.
This is my inbox is already being bombarded by privacy people who are saying this is a bad idea, this is very Orwellian, it's going to lead to giant databases of us being tracked, and it won't actually solve the problem of immigration anyway. So, I mean, who knows?
It definitely won't solve the problem of immigration, because if you are somebody intent on not being noticed, you won't have the digital ID and you'll be doing jobs You know, you only got to watch those border force programs, you know, when they knock down a fake wall in the back of a Chinese takeaway and there's 78 people making moody cigarettes in the back or something. You know, so those people are not going to have the digital ID.
Well, no, people are saying actually now it's going to push these people more into the shadows because they're going to be trying to avoid this system.
There it is.
And you know, the iPhone system is very simple. You basically just scan it almost like a card reader or like when you're tapping to pay, and it just checks that you have the ID.
Well, the thing is, I mean, we mentioned about databases. You know, there's a good reason why these, you know, these huge data centres, and the American announced last week, of course, they're ploughing billions into the UK, Microsoft and others, into this country because, you know, we are good at that kind of stuff. But there is a point when you go, why do we need all this data centre stuff? What's the purpose of that?
And
this is the purpose, sure.
Going to get bigger as well. There's so much stuff being stored now, and then all these data centers being used to process AI. I think we're going to be a country of data centers at some point.
You do kind of wonder. I mean, the AI thing is kind of interesting, and we've all used it, and it's very useful, and it is kind of, at the moment, we kind of all use it as a sort of a super Google, right? You know, you can ask something, you do get very precise answers, rather than having this choice of like 500 websites you've got to go through. So journalistically, I mean, it can make some people lazy. I could write intros to this show on AI if I wanted to. Or look, but I've never done that.
Well, I hope you don't replace me with an AI one day, because I love coming on this show.
Are you not the AI version? We've been given false information.
Well, I tell you what, actually, you know how the airplane Wi-Fi locks you down to texting? Well, I found out on my last flight that it also lets you text AI. So I was chatting with the AI on the plane. I was playing a little game of Dungeons and Dragons with the AI, which is very lame, but it worked. I was 36,000 feet in the air, chatting to an AI about dragons, and it was brilliant.
Can I say that's the geekiest thing you've ever told me?
It really is, isn't it?
I love that.
As I said it, I was like, why am I telling this story?
Exactly.
It's awful.
Well, digital ID is not going off our agenda. We will talk about that on the show tomorrow. Let's talk about this. It doesn't surprise me when I saw this stat that YouTube content creators have contributed 2.2 billion to the UK economy in the last year.
Oh, enormous. And it's from Oxford Economics, and they're saying it's supported 45,000 jobs, and that doesn't surprise me. I go to these tech events and I meet a lot of YouTubers, people do this professionally, and they all have teams. You know, you see the one person's face on the video, but they all have, you know, 5, 10, 15 people who are, you know, running editing, running production, and I think probably a lot of people don't appreciate the work that goes into this. What I will say is I actually think it's quite a good thing because, you know, the UK has always been very strong creatively, great theatre, great acting, great music, obviously, and I think this is just another extension of that. It's a way for us to export our creativity to the world via the internet, and it probably boosts tourism as well because people get to see all of our
So this is
places.
essentially taxation.
Yes, of course.
Money to the economy.
And you know, these YouTubers make a lot of money. They're going out spending. They're buying cars. You know, buying gifts for their family. And so, you know, it's a good way for us to drive the economy in the digital age. So I think it's. You know,
Isn't one of the problems though? Because I could counter this now. I've only just thought about this. This is brilliant, Sean. That there's a lot of kids. So my little boy, who's 11, says, you know, I'm going to be a YouTuber, gaming and stuff. And I sort of, you know, he's saying it because he's 11. He's not made a big career plan or anything.
And you say you should be a radio host.
Exactly, yeah. I definitely won't encourage him into this industry. But is it possible that whilst there are lots of people, there are some success stories, but most people who try it, it's a bit like going on the X Factor. Most people never succeed. Some do. And while those others are trying to succeed, they're not actually working anywhere else.
I suppose not everyone can be
there's a chasm, there's a gap where people, young kids are going, I want to be an influencer or a content creator, as it's now called. Things like this.
I do think you're right, but what I will also say is that these platforms almost can't get enough content. Like even though they have so much, they are still technically content starved because so many people use them now.
Yeah.
Even with the vast number of content creators, they still can't get enough out there to tick all the niches, fill everyone's algorithms, and so I think there is still probably a capacity for your child to become a YouTube star. I don't know if they're watching, but
if he makes 2.2 billion a year, then I'm happy with that. I can go and lay in a hammock in Barbados.
Oh, absolutely, that's the dream. So, you know, don't crash the dream.
Indeed.
You do it from home. It's quite nice, actually.
TikTok is one of them. Some people stayed away from TikTok for a while when it comes to influencers, I heard, because they didn't want to be contributing to the Chinese economy. And, of course, that's about to change.
Yes, but only in America, of course. Here, nothing is changing about TikTok, although it is banned on government devices here, but, you know, there's no plans to ban it in the UK.
Yeah.
In the US, they're doing this whole thing where they're basically redistributing the ownership of TikTok. Trump is supposed to be signing a deal with China today on it. China, as he would say. China. he's doing that. So 6 out of the 7 board seats are going to be Americans. There's lots of investors. Rupert Murdoch, potentially one of them, is mooted. So, you know, lots of media industry experience there.
So they're buying the whole thing from China?
Yes, well, except less than 20% will still be owned by ByteDance, which is the Chinese company that owns it. And actually, they have their own version of TikTok in China called Douyin, so they're not even using TikTok. I mean, obviously, the original fear around TikTok in the US was that Chinese government could compel TikTok to hand over, information on US users, and America obviously doesn't want that. It's been a big bugbear for Trump, although obviously this was happening in Biden's government as well. So a lot of fear there, but it's going to be American, and they're going to retrain the algorithm on American users. So it's going to be a brand new algorithm, so people in America might see different content. Here in the UK, nothing's changing.
It won't make any difference. That's interesting, because it was said, wasn't it, that Huawei and other companies, and it was said that anything Chinese you've got to be careful of, because you think you're just scrolling through innocent videos of people doing wacky stuff, but actually they are just sucking out your data
and brainwashing you at the same time.
Brainwashing you, and also without you even realizing it. You thought it was a fluffy cat video, but actually it was telling you that the Communist Party is the way forward, and simultaneously getting your national insurance number and all your other details out of your phone. Now, that was obviously an overstretch of reality, but that was the fear, wasn't it? That this is a Chinese company, and China are a country that are probably, as a government, not the people, but as a government, not very pleasant people. It's a communist regime.
No, but ultimately, there's nothing they can really do about this. America has gone forward with this, and if the companies operating in America, China can kick up a fuss, and has, but there's not much they can really do about it.
Let's move to this story. iPhone owners could miss top features as Apple issues a stark warning over crackdowns and says your privacy could be exposed. What's going on here?
So Apple is basically having this sort of long-running beef with the EU, specifically the Digital Markets Act, and they're saying that the EU regulation is far too restrictive, and it's basically forcing them to delay or even abandon features in the EU entirely.
Wow.
So the new live translation feature on the AirPods, that's not releasing in the EU. There are some Apple Maps features that aren't releasing in the EU. We've got it here, but what they're trying to do is basically warn other governments not to follow suit with the EU. They're saying that it's too strict, too stringent, these rules. Currently, the UK rules aren't too strict, and so that these features are coming to Brits. But Apple is very fearful that this is going to
so this is
emulated here.
This is the Brexit benefit.
It is. We're getting the features that the EU aren't getting.
You can hear somebody speaking Japanese to you.
Which is ironically, you can go to Europe as a Brit and then use these features to translate what the Europeans are saying.
But they can't do it back.
They can't do it back.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Hey, Pierre. Put your head... Oh, you haven't... Sorry, mate.
So they might know what you're saying. Well, fortunately, a lot of Europeans do speak English, so it might be okay.
I think they probably are okay. You've got the new iPhone there.
Got the new... I'm going to...
I only know... The only reason I knew that...
camera? Yeah.
I only knew that because of the colour.
Cosmic orange. And this I love. This is the... MagSafe wallet accessory. Slaps to the back of the thing. I'm not going to show my cards because I don't want to expose the details, but you can hold 3 cards in there, and I use this instead of a case. It's great, and I can put it down. It doesn't...
So you use the back bit instead of the case.
Yeah.
That's the Pro Max, right?
Yeah, this is the Pro Max. Beautiful.
It's the first time Apple have introduced this kind of orangey colour.
Yeah, usually the Pro phones they make quite boring, but this year they've done a blue, an orange, and a silver. So there's no black one, which has proved a little bit controversial, but I think it was quite nice, actually.
Yeah, a mate of mine's literally just bought that.
Are you gonna upgrade?
I think I'll probably.
You're gonna go for the orange?
I don't know, because he was saying to me, and I said, well, the trouble is, you buy something, it's got, because the colour is it's very attractive. I can see the likability.
And they've got this lovely tropical wallpaper.
See, that goes with it.
Makes want to go on holiday.
But most people then put a case on the back.
They do, which I think ruins it. This is why I use the wallet, because it's just tall enough so that when you put your phone down on a surface, the cameras don't touch the surface. But these phones, they're extremely rugged now. Like, they're very difficult to break. I drop my phone all the time. I've never cracked a screen. In fact, I've even dropped this one already. I dropped it on the plane and it knocked it, and it's fine. Look, beautiful.
It is a stunning bit of kit. Let's move to this story. Seriously, Mark Zuckerberg launches Meta smart glasses. I mean, what's the deal with it? Do you remember the Google glasses a few years ago? I don't know what the hell happened to them.
No, they got phased out. It wasn't the right time.
I think Ray-Ban do a smart glass thing that's really just a camera in it and some headphones.
Yeah, so that they teamed up with Meta, and actually they'd now do it with Oakley as well, so you can get some fun Oakley sports glasses. To date, these Ray-Ban glasses, they've had a camera in and then microphone and speakers so you can chat to AI. This new version, which is the Meta Ray-Ban display, it has a screen in, so you look through your right lens and you can see apps floating. And
Have you seen this yet?
I've used it, I've tried it in California, and it really works. And actually, one of the weirdest features is it has a captioning feature. So if I'm looking at you and you're speaking to me, I can see captions of what you're saying in real time floating in front of your face. So if you're in a busy restaurant, somewhere that's noisy, I can see what you're saying as well as hear it. You can have maps pop up so you can navigate without having to constantly look at your phone. So they're great for avoiding phone snatching in public. Really, it worked really well. I think
you got a text message in your.
It popped up. I did a video call and I could see the person's face floating in front of me. But it's not a headset. Just they look like regular glasses, and they're slightly bulkier. But you know, a lot of hipsters wear bulky glasses anyway. So.
Of course, the next obvious evolution of that would be they'd just be contact lenses.
Oh, absolutely. And but then you get to the point where it's like, should this be just in your brain and you just stimulate, you know, your brain?
Well,
with
I mean, you don't
with
have to be a conspiracy theorist to kind of work out that would ultimately be where it would go.
Because ultimately, the smartphone is quite a bad device, really, when you think about it, because there's so much content and this vast digital world, but we're squeezing it all through this tiny phone screen. And actually, what you would want is, you know, overlay it on the world, see it through your glasses or contact lenses,
so if
and
somebody,
then it can be as big as you like.
Let's say you go to Mark Zuckerberg's big powwow for all you tech heads, and you turn up there and they say, oh, we've got a new one here. We're not talking much about it. It's a little chip we just implant in the back of your neck or in the skin under your thumb, and all you have to do is you press the right part of your body and just go, call Ian, and it will call you, or fire up this, or play music, etc. Would you have the Zuckerberg chip of doom?
I think the day stuff has to start being implanted in me, especially by Zuckerberg, is the day that maybe I leave tech journalism.
There you go.
I'm very needle phobic, so you know the idea of having someone put a chip inside me is.
Didn't we talk about this before? Some companies are doing the chip with.
Oh yeah, people have been
Norway,
doing chips for years.
You can open doors in your company.
Yeah, you can get NFC chips. Some people use it to make payments, but it's quite a niche use case, as you can imagine, because a lot of people don't want chips under their skin. And also, you know, this technology outdates, and your underskin chip today might be rubbish in 10 years, and that's a lot more significant than upgrading your phone. Is that
you'd be full of chips, wouldn't you?
Yes.
You wouldn't know what to do.
But they're supposed to be microchip cats and dogs, so maybe it's not too bad after all.
That's very true. That's very true. Listen, Sean, we've hit the clock. Great to see you again. Back on Terra Firma as well. Check all of what Sean does and talks about in The Sun. So many stories in your section in The Sun.
Non-stop this month.
Tech. It is non-stop. Just Google it, check it out over there at The Sun. He is Sean Keach, who is the science and technology correspondent. Thank you to him. Back with you after this on Talk.
Hello, Jezza.
You all right?
I'm good.
You
What are you
had your
doing?
drink?
I've had my drink.
Well, I've been running around.
I'm ready now.
I'm sure you are.
Should we
right.
start the show?
No, we can't. Saturday the 15th of November, here's a promise. You will not have seen anything like it. You will get honesty, you will get authenticity, and if we get our way, you might even be able to cram in at the top. 3-tier, World of Common Sense with Mike Graham.
And Jeremy Kyle.
In that order.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is from Gina in Essex, who says, we already have national insurance cards, passports, birth certificates that prove you are a British national. When you apply for a job in the UK, you have to show your passport or your paperwork to prove you can work in the UK. This will not work. This will not work and is very intrusive. She's talking about the digital ID that's just been announced. Those who don't have these documents will go under the radar, even with digital ID being compulsory. Exactly. The idea that this is going to solve immigration and the government are stupid enough to think we're going to fall for that. I'm not suggesting either they want to database your head because there's some secret plan to control you, although that is a view that many people have. However, it is just, I think worth saying that the immigration thing is cobblers. Mary is in Cyprus. What have you got for us, Mary? Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian.
Hello.
Nice to talk to you.
You too.
I wanted to answer your question, which was, can you trust Reform UK or something like that?
Over the Conservatives. This is what Boris Johnson's saying. You can only trust the Tories.
Yeah, well, no. Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree with Boris. So in answer to your question is yes, but there is a but.
Go on.
I think that Nigel Farage and Richard Tice come over very well, but the best person on the reform, I think, is the lady Sarah
Pochin.
Now, I think she comes over very well.
Yeah, she does.
And I think she would make a very good Prime Minister and one of the best ladies. Sorry, all the other ladies who've been Prime Ministers and all the rest of it.
It's nothing wrong with that.
But I think that she could be very much like Margaret Thatcher, but in a sort of a much quieter way. I like what she says and the way she comes over.
She's incredibly natural. We've had her on a number of times, as I'm sure you know, and she always comes across incredibly well. And remember, she's only been doing the job for a matter of months, really. So I think she's punching incredibly well in this arena, this bear pit that is Parliament and the whole system.
Well, and in front of all the men, of course, and I mean, God forbid on the Labour side whoever gets in to be Deputy Prime Minister, because they will never match up to her.
That's fair.
Sorry, but...
There it is. Mary, thank you very much indeed. A big endorsement for Sarah as Prime Minister, says Mary. Reference Andy Burnham. Ian says Burnham could be Prime Minister without being a Labour MP. They could put him in the House of Lords. Then his deputy could front PMQs. Technically, that could happen. There's a couple of problems with that. Number one, it would look horrendous that the Prime Minister never showed up in the House of Commons. And number two, it would take Keir Starmer to make that manoeuvre right now. I think I'd be fair to say that, Peter, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think that'll be...
I don't imagine you'd appoint somebody to replace you.
No, I don't think Andy Burnham's going to be in the House of Lords immediately anyway. But it is a fascinating story, and he's sort of going, oh, people are saying to me, it's not really my decision and all the rest of it. Not so sure, not so sure. Yes, making himself available to the media, never passing a microphone without speaking into it seems to be Andy Burnham's strategy at the moment. Very interesting. We're talking about that.
I think he's 10 years too late. I think he is the guy that could have fronted the Labour Party back when they clearly
he failed to
beat
Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn, and this is the guy they think can save them. Really? Really?
Well reminded on that, yes. He was up against Miliband and Corbyn.
Yeah, didn't beat David Miliband either, the only person who's ever left politics to spend less time with his family.
That's a very good point.
Thank you.
Love it. What is happening?
Well, mandatory digital IDs seems to have come out of nowhere. It's been talked about for a while, certainly, but the fact that it is now apparently happening, I'll be very interested in our viewers and listeners' thoughts on that. I'm not particularly happy about it, to be brutally honest. We've got Ivan Sampson, the immigration lawyer, in the studio in a few minutes' time, talking about all sorts of issues, including the Afghan dinghy migrant given asylum in the UK, and he goes on an 8-week holiday to Afghanistan.
That story, Peter, I said it earlier. If you were in a pub and somebody told you that, like literally